What would you do if you discovered your employee wasn't who they seemed to be? Lena Hart thought she had a thief in her company. Security cameras showed her night janitor sneaking into restricted areas, lingering near sensitive files, accessing executive computers after midnight. With $1 billion product launch days away, she had every reason to believe Noah Brooks was selling her secrets. But when she followed him one cold November night, what she found wasn't corporate espionage. It was something that would shatter everything she thought she knew about success, sacrifice, and second chances. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey takes us. The smell of industrial cleaner and the soft hum of computers filled the executive floor at 11:47 p.m. Lena Hart stood motionless in the darkness of her corner office, her silhouette barely visible against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Seattle skyline. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman who had climbed ruthlessly to the top, who had sacrificed relationships, sleep, and peace of mind to become the youngest CEO of Tech Vanguard Industries at 34. Tonight, that empire felt fragile. She watched the security monitor on her desk, her jaw tight. The grainy footage showed a figure moving through the dimly lit corridors of the building, a man in a gray custodial uniform pushing a cleaning cart. Noah Brooks, the night janitor, 42 years old according to his employee file. Single father, quiet, unremarkable. Or so everyone thought. Lena had been CEO for exactly 93 days. Long enough to know that something was wrong, not long enough to know who to trust. She pressed rewind on the footage and watched again. There. Noah's cart paused outside the server room. His hand reached toward the keypad. The camera angle shifted, and for 3 crucial seconds, he disappeared from view. When the feed picked him up again, he was inside, the door closing softly behind him. Her assistant director of security, Marcus Chen, had brought her the footage 2 weeks ago. At first, Lena had dismissed it. Janitors had building access. They cleaned everywhere. But Marcus had been persistent, and the more Lena watched, the more patterns emerged. Noah entered restricted areas consistently, always after midnight, always when the building was nearly empty. He spent longer than necessary near executive workstations. Last Tuesday, motion sensors had detected him on the 42nd floor, where the company's proprietary AI development lab was housed. He had no reason to be there. The cleaning schedule didn't include that floor on Tuesdays. It could be innocent, Marcus had said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Or it could be industrial espionage. With the Genesis project launching in 2 weeks, we can't take chances. Companies would pay millions for what we're developing. Should I call it in? Lena had held up her hand. Not yet. I need more than suspicious timing. If we're wrong, we destroy an innocent man's livelihood. If we're right and we tip him off too early, we lose our chance to find out who he's working for. What she hadn't told Marcus was that she'd already started her own investigation. She'd pulled Noah's employment records, his background check, his references. Everything had come back clean, almost too clean. Noah Brooks had appeared in Seattle 7 years ago as if from nowhere. Before that, his work history was sparse and vague. General labor, contract work. Nothing that explained the careful, methodical way he moved through the building, or the fact that he seemed to know exactly which areas had the most valuable information. Lena's phone buzzed, a text from her head of product development, Sarah Kim. Still at office, need your sign-off on final Genesis protocols before manufacturer meeting tomorrow. Where are you? She typed back quickly. Emergency came up. Send them to my personal email. I'll review tonight. Another lie. The emergencies were piling up, but none of them were the kind she could delegate. Lena grabbed her coat, a long black trench that made her feel like a detective in an old noir film, and headed for the elevator. The building was quiet, that peculiar silence of a place built for thousands, but occupied by dozens. Her heels echoed against polished floors. She took the elevator down to the 38th floor, where she knew Noah would be working now based on his pattern. When the doors opened, she stepped into shadow. The overhead lights were dimmed for night mode, and emergency exit signs cast everything in an eerie green glow. She could hear the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner. Lena moved carefully, staying close to the walls. Years of corporate warfare had taught her to be strategic, to observe before acting. She found Noah in the Eastern Conference room, methodically running a vacuum across expensive carpet. His movements were efficient, practiced. He wore wireless earbuds, and she could see his lips moving, talking to himself, or perhaps on a call. She ducked behind a partition as he turned. Her heart hammered. This was absurd. She was the CEO of a billion-dollar company, hiding in her own building like a spy. But something about this situation demanded secrecy. If Noah was stealing from her, she needed to catch him in the act. If he wasn't, if there was some other explanation, then she needed to understand it before security cameras and corporate lawyers got involved. Noah finished with the conference room and moved into the hallway. Lena waited, counting to 10, then followed. He pushed his cart toward the elevators, pressed the button, and waited. Lena held her breath. If he went up to the executive floors again, she'd have her answer. The elevator arrived. Noah stepped inside. The doors began to close. Lena lunged forward, catching them just in time. She slipped into the elevator, heart pounding, and pressed herself into the corner. Noah's eyes widened. Ms. Hart? For a moment, Lena's carefully constructed plan evaporated. She stood there, the CEO of the company, in an elevator with the janitor she'd been spying on, with no reasonable explanation for why she was in the building at midnight. Noah, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Working late? Always, ma'am? His voice was soft, almost gentle, nothing like the voice of a corporate spy. Didn't expect to see you here. Everything all right? I could ask you the same thing. Lena watched his face carefully. He looked tired, deep circles under dark eyes, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight that never got lighter. I've noticed you've been working some unusual hours, areas that aren't on your normal route. Something flickered across Noah's face. Fear? Guilt? It passed too quickly to identify. I pick up extra sections sometimes, he said. The night supervisor, Danny, he's got a bad back. I help him cover when it acts up. Is that a problem? The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. No problem, Lena said smoothly. I just like to know what happens in my building. Have a good night, Noah. He nodded, pushing his cart out into the lobby. You too, Ms. Hart. Drive safe. Lena let the elevator doors close and pressed the button for the parking garage. Her hands were shaking. That conversation had revealed nothing concrete, but Noah's nervousness had been real. He was hiding something. She was certain of it now. She sat in her Tesla in the dark garage for 20 minutes, waiting. At 12:47 a.m., Noah emerged from the building's service entrance. He changed out of his custodial uniform into jeans and a worn Carhartt jacket. He walked to an old Honda Civic, at least 15 years old, maybe older, with a dent in the rear bumper and a crack across the windshield. Lena started her car but kept the lights off. When Noah pulled out of the lot, she followed at a distance. This was crazy. She knew it was crazy. CEOs didn't tail their employees through city streets at 1 in the morning. They hired private investigators. They involved the proper authorities. But something about this situation felt personal in a way Lena couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way Noah had looked at her in the elevator, not with the deference she usually received, but with a kind of weary concern, as if he was worried about her. Or maybe it was because, deep down, Lena didn't want him to be a thief. She'd watched him work for weeks now, always quiet, always thorough. He treated the building with a respect that most executives didn't bother with. She'd seen him carefully move personal photos on desks before dusting, return office supplies to their proper places, water plants that were dying from neglect. Those weren't the actions of someone casing the place for robbery. Noah drove north, away from the gleaming downtown corridor where Tech Vanguard's headquarters pierced the sky. The buildings grew shorter, older. The streets grew darker. Lena had lived in Seattle for 8 years, but she'd never been to this part of the city. This was the Seattle that didn't make it into the tourism brochures, the Seattle of broken streetlights and chain-link fences, of corner stores with bars on the windows and apartment buildings that had seen better decades. Noah's Honda turned into a parking lot beside a 3-story brick building. The sign above the door read, Rainier Community Center in faded letters. Several of the bulbs were burned out, making it read Rai Ko Iti Che Ter. Lena parked across the street, killing her engine. She watched as Noah got out of his car, pulled a backpack from the trunk, and headed not for the front door but around the side of the building. He moved quickly, purposefully. This wasn't a random stop. He came here often. She waited 5 minutes, then crossed the street. The neighborhood was quiet except for distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. The community center looked abandoned. No lights in the windows, no signs of activity. But when Lena reached the side door Noah had used, she heard voices. The door was unlocked. Lena slipped inside, finding herself in a dim hallway that smelled of old paint and chlorine. The voices grew louder, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. She followed them, her footsteps silent on worn linoleum. Light spilled from a doorway at the end of the hall. Lena approached it carefully and peered around the corner. What she saw made her breath catch. The room had once been a gymnasium, high ceilings, basketball hoops folded against the walls, scuffed wooden floors. But it had been transformed. Long tables filled the space, and on those tables sat computers, dozens of them, mismatched monitors and CPU towers, tangled cables running everywhere like electronic spaghetti. Some of the machines looked ancient, others cobbled together from parts. None of them matched, but they were all running. Screens glowed with code, with design programs, with tutorial videos. And surrounding those screens were children, teenagers mostly, ranging from maybe 13 to 18, hunched over keyboards with the intense focus of surgeons. There were about 20 of them, boys and girls, some in threadbare hoodies, others in clothes that had been mended multiple times. And standing at the front of the room, illuminated by the blue glow of a projector screen, was Noah Brooks. Lena had to blink to make sure she was seeing correctly. This wasn't the quiet, humble janitor who pushed a cart through her building. This man stood tall, confident. He moved across the room with authority, gesturing at the screen where lines of code scrolled past. He was teaching. "All right, listen up," Noah's voice carried easily across the room. "What I'm showing you here isn't in any textbook. This is real-world application, the kind of problem-solving that separates someone who can code from someone who can build something that matters. Mia, what did I tell you about nested loops last week?" A girl with box braids and glasses looked up from her screen. "That they're powerful but dangerous, like giving a toddler a chainsaw." "Exactly," Noah grinned, and the expression transformed his face, erasing years of weariness. "They'll get the job done, but if you're not careful, you'll end up with a mess that crashes your entire system. Now look at this function here. Anyone see the problem?" A skinny kid with acne raised his hand tentatively. "The iteration counter isn't incremented inside the loop?" "Jamal, my man," Noah pointed at him. "That's exactly it. You see that, everyone? One missing line of code and this thing runs forever, eating memory until the whole program dies. That's why you always test your loops with small data sets first. Run it, break it, fix it, then scale up. Real engineering isn't about writing perfect code the first time. It's about writing code you can debug." The students nodded, some of them already turning back to their screens to check their own work. Noah moved through the room, pausing at different stations. He leaned over one boy's shoulder, pointing at something on the screen. "David, you're close, but think about what happens when the user inputs a negative number. You need data validation here." "How do I do that?" David asked. "What would you do if someone handed you a cup of coffee when you asked for water?" Noah replied. David thought for a moment. "Tell them it's wrong and ask for water again?" "Exactly. Your program needs to do the same thing. Check the input. If it's wrong, send an error message and ask again. Try implementing that." Lena stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing. This made no sense. Noah Brooks was a janitor. His employment file had said he barely finished high school, but the man in this room was teaching advanced programming concepts with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for decades. The way he moved, the terminology he used, the casual authority with which he commanded the room. This was someone who belonged in her company's development department, not pushing a mop through its hallways. "Mr. Noah?" A small voice came from the back. A girl who couldn't have been older than 13 raised her hand shyly. "I still don't understand APIs. I get that they're a bridge between programs, but why can't programs just talk to each other directly?" Noah walked over to her station, pulling up a chair. "Good question, Sophie. Tell me, do you speak Vietnamese?" The girl shook her head. "Neither do I. So if you and I needed to have a conversation and neither of us spoke the other's language, what would we need?" "A translator?" "Exactly. That's what an API is. A translator. See, every program is written in its own specific way, with its own rules and structure. If we made them all talk directly to each other, it would be chaos. They wouldn't understand each other. So instead we create APIs, standardized ways for programs to request information and receive it in a format they can understand. Does that make sense? Sophie's face lit up. Oh, so it's like a menu at a restaurant? The kitchen doesn't need to know exactly what I want. I just order from the menu and they give me what I asked for? You just became my favorite student, Noah said, laughing. Yes, that's exactly what it is. The menu is the API. You don't need to know how the kitchen works. You just need to know how to order. Beautiful analogy. Lena felt something shift in her chest. She'd spent 2 hours that afternoon in a meeting where her senior developers had tried to explain API integration to the board of directors, and they'd completely failed to make it clear. Noah had just done it in 30 seconds with a metaphor a 7th grader could understand. Who the hell was this man? All right, everyone, it's almost 2 a.m., Noah announced, checking his watch. I know some of you have school tomorrow. Start saving your work and shutting down. Jamal, Mia, David, you 3 are doing great work on your portfolio projects. Keep pushing. Sophie, practice what we talked about tonight. Everyone else, remember, the code you write doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work. Perfect is the enemy of done, and done is better than perfect. The students began packing up, their movements reluctant. Several of them clustered around Noah asking questions, showing him things on their screens. He gave each one his full attention, never rushing, never dismissive. Lena backed away from the doorway, her heart pounding. She needed to leave before she was discovered. But as she turned to go, her shoulder caught the edge of the door frame, and a metal bracket scraped loudly against the wall. The conversation in the gym stopped. "Hello?" Noah's voice called out. "Someone there?" Lena froze. She could run, probably should run, but her feet wouldn't move. A moment later, Noah appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from alert to shocked when he saw her. "Ms. Hart?" For the second time that night, Lena had no prepared explanation. She stood in a rundown community center at 2 in the morning, having followed her employee from work, having spied on what was clearly a private project. There was no spinning this. "I followed you," she said, deciding honesty was her only option. "From the office, I needed to know what you were doing." Noah's face hardened. The warmth she'd seen in the classroom vanished, replaced by something guarded and cold. "So you thought you'd stalk me? What, you think I'm stealing from your precious company?" "The security footage shows me doing my job," Noah interrupted. His voice was quiet but sharp. "And picking up extra work to cover for a colleague. That's what you saw. That's all you saw. You were in restricted areas set because I clean restricted areas. Because every building in this city has places where janitors are supposed to go, but nobody wants to see them. We're supposed to be invisible, right? Clean up everyone's mess, but never be acknowledged for it." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. "So what, you followed me here to catch me selling your company's secrets? To find my criminal lair?" "I didn't know what I'd find," Lena said, her voice rising to match his. "You show up on my security feeds in places you shouldn't be, at times that don't make sense. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask me." Noah's composure cracked. "You were supposed to treat me like a human being instead of a suspect. But I guess that's too much to expect from someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Rich, powerful, used to controlling everything and everyone." Noah took a step closer, and Lena saw the exhaustion in his eyes had turned to something sharper. Anger, yes, but also pain. "You know what you would have found if you just talked to me? A father working 3 jobs to keep his daughter fed and in school. A man who spends his free time trying to give these kids the opportunities he never had. But instead you followed me like I'm some kind of criminal." Behind Noah, several students had appeared in the hallway, drawn by the raised voices. They looked scared, protective of their teacher. Lena felt shame burn in her chest. He was right. She'd made assumptions based on appearances, on statistics, on the kind of unconscious bias she'd sworn she'd never carry. She saw a janitor accessing computers and assumed theft. It had never occurred to her that he might be the kind of person who belonged around computers for entirely legitimate reasons. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I should have talked to you first. But Noah, what you're doing here, what I just saw, You're not just some janitor, are you? The way you teach, the things you know, that's not something you pick up from night school. Noah's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at her with eyes that held years of stories he clearly had no intention of sharing. Finally, he spoke. I need you to leave, Ms. Hart. These kids don't need this kind of attention. They don't need people like you deciding what's appropriate for them or judging whether they deserve what little I can give them. I'm not judging. You're standing in a community center in a neighborhood you've probably never visited, looking at equipment that's mostly garbage I've salvaged and rebuilt, and I can see it on your face. You're calculating, wondering if this is legal, if I'm using company resources, if this reflects badly on Tech Vanguard. That's what people like you do. You calculate. You're wrong, Lena said, but even as the words left her mouth, she wondered if he was. I was calculating, but not what you think. I was trying to understand how a janitor knows more about coding than half my development team. Maybe your development team isn't as good as you think they are. That stung because it was probably true. Lena had inherited a team that was technically proficient but lacked innovation. They could execute orders but rarely exceeded them. The man standing in front of her had just taught a 13-year-old to understand APIs using a restaurant metaphor. That was pedagogical genius combined with deep technical knowledge. Who are you really? Lena asked softly. Noah's expression shuddered completely. I'm the night janitor. That's all you need to know. Now please leave before you scare these kids more than you already have. He turned away, shepherding the students back into the gym. The door closed firmly behind them, and Lena heard the sound of a lock clicking into place. She stood alone in the hallway, her carefully ordered world tilting on its axis. She'd come here looking for a thief and found a teacher. She'd expected to uncover corporate espionage, and instead discovered something that looked like pure altruism. But the biggest mystery wasn't what Noah was doing, it was who he'd been before he became a janitor. Because people didn't acquire that level of expertise by accident. They didn't teach with that kind of authority unless they'd been someone important, someone respected in their field. Noah Brooks had a history, and if her instincts were right, it was a history that intersected somehow with her own industry. Lena walked back to her car, her mind already racing ahead. She'd apologize to Noah properly tomorrow, make sure he understood she wasn't trying to shut down his program. But she was also going to find out the truth. Not because she still suspected him of wrongdoing, but because she'd just watched a brilliant mind work. And brilliant minds didn't end up pushing mops in office buildings without a story. And in Seattle's tech industry, stories like that usually involve someone getting burned. As she drove back toward downtown, Lena's phone buzzed with another message from Sarah Kim, this one more urgent. Genesis prototype is showing system conflicts and stress testing. Might need to delay launch. Call me ASAP. Lena's stomach dropped. The Genesis project, Tech Vanguard's revolutionary AI-assisted operating system, was supposed to launch in 12 days. Delays meant missing their market window, which meant losing to competitors, which meant potentially losing hundreds of millions of dollars and her credibility as CEO. She pulled over and dialed Sarah's number. How bad is it? Lena asked when Sarah answered. Bad. The AI integration keeps causing kernel panics when we run high-load simulations. It's like the different components are fighting each other instead of working together. Our senior architects have been on it for 6 hours, and we're not getting anywhere. Thomas wants to roll back to the previous build, but that means losing 3 months of progress. Lena closed her eyes. This was exactly the kind of crisis that made or broke a CEO. No rollbacks. We didn't work this hard to quit now. Keep the team on it. I'll be in early tomorrow and we'll figure this out. Lena, we might not have a choice. If we can't solve this in the next 48 hours, then we solve it in 47. I'll see you at 6 a.m. She ended the call and sat in her car, watching the city lights blur through sudden, unexpected tears. She'd been so sure, so certain she could handle this job, that she deserved this position. But right now, with her flagship product failing and her judgment so off that she'd stalked an innocent man like a criminal, Lena felt the weight of her inexperience crushing down. The tech industry didn't forgive weakness. She knew that. She'd seen brilliant people destroyed by single mistakes, by one failed product launch or one poor decision. She'd clawed her way to the CEO position by being perfect, by never showing doubt, by always having the answer. But tonight, she had no answers. Just questions that multiplied like errors in bad code. She drove home through empty streets, parked in her building's underground garage, and rode the elevator to her penthouse apartment. The space was beautiful, all glass and steel and carefully chosen furniture that had never been sat on by friends, because Lena didn't have time for friends. She had colleagues, subordinates, competitors, but no one she could call at 3 a.m. and admit she was terrified of failing. She poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey she didn't drink and stood at the window, looking out at the same city she'd seen from her office earlier. From up here, Seattle looked perfect, orderly, prosperous, glittering with promise. You couldn't see the broken streetlights or the chain-link fences. You couldn't see the community centers where janitors taught kids to code on salvaged computers. You couldn't see the real world at all. Lena thought about Noah in that classroom, the way he'd lit up while teaching, the genuine joy on those kids' faces when they understood something new. When was the last time she'd felt that kind of purpose? When had work become about stock prices and market share instead of actually building something meaningful? She thought about how he'd looked at her in the hallway, not with awe or deference, but with disappointment, as if he'd expected better from her, as if she'd failed some test she hadn't known she was taking. Maybe she had. Lena's phone buzzed again. Another crisis, another fire to put out. The messages would never stop. The demands would never ease. This was the life she'd chosen, the price of success. But standing in her perfect apartment at 3 a.m, watching a city that looked beautiful from a distance, Lena wondered for the first time if she'd chosen wrong. If maybe success wasn't supposed to feel this empty. She finished the whiskey in one burning swallow and went to her computer. She had work to do. Always more work. But first, she opened a new search window and typed, Noah Brooks, Seattle, Systems Architect. The results would probably show nothing. He'd covered his tracks too well. But Lena hadn't become CEO by accepting easy answers. She'd found Noah's secret classroom. Now she'd find out why a man with his talents was cleaning offices instead of running them. And maybe, just maybe, she'd figure out why that question felt more important than saving her company's flagship product. The city lights blurred again as exhaustion finally caught up with her. Lena closed her laptop and went to bed, knowing sleep would be elusive. Her mind was already spinning through possibilities, calculating odds, planning next moves. But underlying all of it was one persistent thought that wouldn't fade. The look in Noah's eyes when he told her to leave. Anger, yes. Protectiveness for his students, absolutely. But also something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, as if he'd seen exactly who Lena was and found her lacking. Tomorrow she would fix this. She would apologize properly, would make sure Noah understood she hadn't meant harm. She would solve the Genesis crisis and prove she deserved her position. But tonight, in the darkness of her penthouse apartment, Lena Hart allowed herself one moment of brutal honesty. She'd followed Noah expecting to find a criminal and had instead encountered someone who might be everything she'd once hoped to become and somehow lost along the way. And that truth was more unsettling than any corporate espionage could ever be. Lena's alarm went off at 5:30, though she'd been awake since 4, staring at her ceiling and replaying the previous night in her mind. The shame hadn't dulled with a few hours of restless half-sleep. If anything, it had sharpened. She'd violated someone's privacy, made assumptions based on class and appearance, and worst of all, she'd done it with the smug certainty that she was protecting her company. The look on Noah's face when he'd realized she'd followed him, that mix of anger and weary resignation, as if he'd been through this before, haunted her. She showered in water too hot, dressed in armor disguised as a charcoal suit, and arrived at Tech Vanguard headquarters by 6:15. The building was already humming with anxious energy. The Genesis crisis had spread overnight from a technical problem to a full-blown emergency. She could feel it in the way people moved through the hallways, too fast, too purposeful, carrying the weight of impending disaster. Sarah Kim met her at the elevator, tablet in hand, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't left the building at all. It's worse than I thought. The kernel panics are cascading. Every time we fix one conflict, 2 more appear. It's like the system is fighting itself. Show me, Lena said, following Sarah to the development lab on the 42nd floor. The room was chaos. Whiteboards covered in equations and flowcharts, empty energy drink cans scattered across desks, 6 of her best engineers hunched over monitors with the glazed expressions of people who'd been staring at code for too many consecutive hours. Thomas Park, her chief architect, looked up when she entered. His face was gray with exhaustion. "Tell me you have good news," Lena said, though she already knew the answer. Thomas shook his head. "The AI learning modules keep trying to optimize system resources in ways that conflict with the core operating protocols. It's like having two drivers fighting for the steering wheel. We've tried isolation layers, priority hierarchies, buffer zones. Nothing works. The fundamental architecture might be flawed." The words hit Lena like a physical blow. Fundamental architecture. That meant the problem wasn't a bug they could patch. It meant the entire system might need to be rebuilt from the ground up. That meant months of delays, millions in losses, and her reputation destroyed before she'd even had a chance to prove herself. "There has to be a solution," she said, moving to Thomas's workstation. "Walk me through what you've tried." For the next 2 hours, Lena immersed herself in the technical details. She'd built her career on being smarter and more dedicated than everyone else, on understanding not just business strategy, but the actual technology her company created. But as Thomas and his team explained their attempts to solve the crisis, Lena felt the limits of her knowledge pressing against her. She could understand the problem. She could see why their solutions weren't working, but she couldn't see the answer. "What if we rebuilt the communication protocols from scratch?" she suggested. "Created a new language for the AI and OS to interface." "That's essentially what we've been trying for the past 8 hours, Thomas said, his voice flat with defeat. "The problem is deeper than communication. It's about fundamental assumptions and how the components prioritize tasks. They're both trying to be in control, and neither wants to yield." Lena stared at the code scrolling across the monitor, and suddenly she heard Noah's voice from the night before. "That's what an API is, a translator. The kitchen doesn't need to know exactly what I want. I just order from the menu and they give me what I asked for." "What if they're not supposed to talk to each other directly?" Lena said slowly. "What if we need a mediator? Something that sits between the AI and the OS, takes requests from both, prioritizes them, and executes them in a way that doesn't create conflicts." Thomas frowned. "Like a middleware buffer? We tried that already. The overhead slowed the system to a crawl." "Not a buffer, a conductor. Something active that manages the relationship instead of just passing messages back and forth." Even as she said it, Lena knew she was out of her depth. She could conceptualize the idea, but she had no idea how to implement it. Sarah leaned forward, suddenly interested. "That's actually not terrible, like a resource management layer that has authority over both components. But the complexity would be insane. We'd need someone who understands both AI behavior and OS architecture at an expert level. Someone who could predict how the components would interact under stress and build decision trees that could handle edge cases we haven't even discovered yet." "How long would it take to build something like that?" Lena asked. Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With our current team? Weeks, maybe months. And that's if we're lucky. We'd essentially be creating a new AI to manage the other AI. The recursion problems alone..." He shook his head. "We don't have the expertise, Lena. This kind of work requires someone who's been doing systems integration for decades, someone who can think in multiple programming paradigms simultaneously." Lena's mind flashed to Noah in that gymnasium, moving between students, explaining complex concepts in simple terms, the ease with which he'd diagnosed problems in their code, the way he'd looked at that girl's screen and immediately identified what was missing, as if he could see the invisible structure beneath the visible code. "Keep working on it," she said. "I might know someone who can help." She left the lab and headed back to her office, her heart pounding. This was insane. She was considering asking a night janitor to save her company's flagship product based on watching him teach teenagers for 30 minutes. Except Noah wasn't just a janitor. She'd seen that clearly last night. Whatever he'd been before, whatever had happened to drive him into custodial work, the man had expertise that her 6-figure engineers lacked. Lena opened her laptop and resumed the search she'd started at 3 a.m. This time she went deeper, using tricks she'd learned from her previous life in corporate intelligence. She searched not for Noah Brooks, but for variations: N. Brooks, Nathan Brooks, Nathaniel Brooks. She cross-referenced with Seattle tech companies, patent filings, industry publications from 7 to 10 years ago. For 2 hours, she found nothing. Then, Buried in an archived forum discussion about ethical practices in software development, she found a username, N. Brooks Systems. The posts were from 9 years ago, highly technical, demonstrating deep knowledge of system architecture. But what caught her attention was the final post in the thread. I've reported the safety concerns through official channels and been told to drop it. I won't. Some things matter more than keeping your job. If this system launches with these vulnerabilities, people could get hurt. I'm going on record now, so when it happens, everyone knows we were warned. The thread ended there. Lena searched for more posts from that username but found nothing. It was as if N. Brooks Systems had vanished from the internet after that final warning. She expanded her search, looking for tech industry scandals 9 years ago involving safety concerns and whistleblowers. It took another 30 minutes before she found it, a scandal at Cyberdyne Systems, a major defense contractor. A senior systems architect had raised concerns about vulnerabilities in software being deployed to critical infrastructure. The company had dismissed the concerns, then fired the architect for violating non-disclosure agreements when he'd tried to report the issues to regulatory agencies. 6 months later, the software had failed catastrophically, causing a power grid failure that had left 3 million people without electricity for 4 days. The architect's name had been redacted from most articles due to the legal settlements involved. But Lena found one small trade publication that had covered the story before the lawyers got involved. The headline read, "Defense Contractor Fires Whistleblower. Nathan Brooks, Industry Questions, Safety Culture." Nathan Brooks. Noah Brooks. Lena sat back, her hands shaking. She'd found him. Or rather, she'd found who he used to be. Nathan Brooks had been more than just a systems architect. According to the article, he'd been one of the most brilliant minds in critical systems integration, someone who'd contributed to the foundational architecture of secure communications networks. He'd been respected, well-paid, sought after, and then he'd thrown it all away to do the right thing. The article mentioned that Cyberdyne had not just fired him, but had effectively blacklisted him throughout the industry, using their connections and influence to ensure he'd never work in tech again. Legal settlements had prevented Nathan from speaking publicly about what had happened. He disappeared from the industry entirely. Now Lena understood the bitterness in Noah's voice when he talked about people like her. He'd worked for people like her. He'd been destroyed by people like her, people who valued profit over safety, who saw whistleblowers as traitors rather than heroes. She closed her laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. The migraine she'd been fighting all morning bloomed into full existence, pulsing behind her temples. She had to talk to Noah, had to apologize properly for last night and for what the industry had done to him. But more than that, and she knew how selfish this was, she needed his help. The Genesis project was dying, and he might be the only person who could save it. But how could she ask him? After following him, after suspecting him, after he'd explicitly told her to leave, after the entire tech industry had already betrayed him once. Lena's phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, her security director. "Need to talk to you about the Brooks situation." "My office?" She took the elevator down to the security wing, dreading whatever Marcus had uncovered. He was sitting at his desk, surrounded by monitors, his expression grim. "I've been reviewing more footage from the past month," Marcus said without preamble. "Noah Brooks has been accessing your personal office." Lena's stomach dropped. What? Marcus pulled up video on his screen. The timestamp showed 2 weeks ago, 3 a.m. Noah entered her office with his cleaning cart, performed his normal custodial duties, then stopped at her desk. He looked around, checking for cameras, Lena realized with a chill, then opened her laptop. "He knew your password," Marcus said, "or he bypassed it somehow. He was in your system for 12 minutes. The footage showed Noah's face illuminated by her laptop screen, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. He was clearly accessing files, reading something intently. Then he closed the laptop, finished cleaning, and left. "This happened 3 times over the past month," Marcus continued. "Always in the middle of the night, always for 10 to 15 minutes. I think we need to bring this to the police, Lena. This is corporate espionage." Lena watched the footage replay, her mind spinning. This contradicted everything she'd learned about Noah. The man who taught kids for free, who'd sacrificed his career for ethics. He was stealing from her? But what else could this be? "Not yet," she said slowly. "Give me 24 hours." Lena, 24 hours, Marcus. If I can't get an explanation that makes sense, we'll involve the authorities. I promise. Marcus looked unhappy, but nodded. Okay, but after that, this goes up the chain, whether you like it or not. Lena left his office feeling sick. Every time she thought she understood what was happening, another piece fell into place that contradicted everything else. Noah was a teacher and a thief? A whistleblower and a spy? None of it made sense. She checked her watch. Nearly 4 p.m. Noah's shift started at 11 p.m. She couldn't wait that long. She needed answers now. The community center looked different in daylight, smaller, more run down. The parking lot was full of potholes, and the brick facade was crumbling in places. Lena parked her Tesla and immediately felt out of place. This was a neighborhood where people noticed expensive cars, and not in a good way. She found the side entrance Noah had used the night before. This time it was locked. She walked around to the front where a faded poster advertised after-school programs and GED classes. The door was open. Inside, the building smelled like old wood and industrial cleaner. A heavy-set woman with gray hair sat at a reception desk, looking up suspiciously when Lena entered. "Help you?" The woman's tone suggested she doubted it. "I'm looking for Noah Brooks. I need to speak with him." "Noah's not here. Won't be until tonight, and even then, I'm not sure he'll want to see you." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You're the one from last night, aren't you? The one who followed him here?" Word traveled fast. "Yes. My name is Lena Hart. I need to apologize to him." "Apologize?" The woman snorted. "You scared those kids half to death. They thought you were from the city, coming to shut us down. Took Noah an hour to calm them down enough to finish the lesson." Guilt twisted in Lena's chest. "I didn't mean to frighten anyone. I made a mistake, a serious one. That's what I want to tell Noah." "Well, he doesn't want to hear it. He told me specifically that if you showed up, I should tell you to leave him alone." The woman crossed her arms. "So there's your message. Leave him alone." "Please," Lena said, and the desperation in her own voice surprised her. "Just tell me when he'll be here. I'll wait. I'll wait all day, if I have to." "Why? So you can harass him more? Follow him to his daughter's school next?" The woman's expression hardened. "I know your type. Rich, powerful, used to getting what you want. But Noah's been through enough. He doesn't need people like you making his life harder." "You're right," Lena said, "about all of it. But I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to fix what I broke." The woman studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "He comes in around 7 to set up the computers before class. But if he tells you to leave, you leave. I don't care who you are or what fancy company you run. This is our space, and we protect our own here." "Thank you," Lena said. "I'll wait." She spent the next 3 hours sitting in her car, watching the neighborhood come alive around her. Kids walked home from school in groups, calling to each other. An elderly man pushed a shopping cart full of cans and bottles. A young mother struggled with a stroller and grocery bags until a neighbor appeared to help. This was a community, Lena realized. Something she'd lost touch with in her steel and glass tower, in her penthouse apartment where she knew none of her neighbors' names. At 6:45, Noah's Honda pulled into the parking lot. He got out carrying 2 large backpacks and froze when he saw Lena's Tesla. His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might just leave. Instead, he walked over to her car and knocked on the window. Lena got out quickly. "Noah, I need to talk to you." "I have nothing to say to you." His voice was cold, all the warmth from the classroom completely absent. "I thought I made that clear last night." "You did, but I need to explain. I need you to understand." "I understand perfectly," Noah interrupted. "You saw a janitor in places he shouldn't be and assumed the worst. You followed me instead of talking to me. You invaded my privacy and scared kids who already have enough to worry about. I understand all of it, Ms. Hart. Now please leave me alone." He started to walk away. Lena's next words came out in a rush, driven by equal parts desperation and shame. "I know who you are, Nathan Brooks. I know what happened at Cyberdyne." Noah stopped. His shoulders tensed, and when he turned back around, his expression was dangerous. "You investigated me. I needed to understand. After last night, nothing made sense. A janitor who teaches advanced programming? Who knows more than my senior engineers? I had to know why. So you dug into my past without my permission. Noah's voice was quiet but furious. Do you understand how that feels? I've spent 7 years building a life where people don't know that story, where I'm just Noah, the janitor who helps kids, and you destroyed that in one night because you needed to understand. I'm sorry. You're sorry? You're sorry? Noah laughed bitterly. You know what happened after I got fired from Cyberdyne? I lost everything. My wife couldn't handle the stress, the financial pressure, the shame. She left me and our daughter. I went from making $200,000 a year to nothing. No one would hire me, not even entry-level positions. You know why? Because people like you decided I was a troublemaker. Someone who couldn't be trusted to keep quiet when it mattered. Nathan, Noah. I cleaned toilets for 2 years before I could even get a custodial job that offered benefits. 2 years of my daughter asking why we lived in a one-bedroom apartment when we used to have a house. 2 years of explaining why Daddy couldn't buy her new shoes, why we ate ramen for dinner 3 nights a week, why I worked 3 jobs and she still barely saw me. His hands were shaking. And you know the worst part? I'd do it all again, because those people at Cyberdyne were wrong, and somebody had to say it, but that doesn't make it hurt less. Lena felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd known intellectually that whistleblowers paid a price, but hearing the details, seeing the pain carved into Noah's face, it made it real in a way that statistics never could. You were right to do what you did, she said quietly. The system that punished you for it was wrong. Easy to say now. Where were people like you 9 years ago when I needed someone to believe me? When I needed someone with power to stand up and say, this man is telling the truth? Noah shook his head. You're all the same. You support whistleblowers in theory, but the moment it might cost you something, you close ranks and protect your own. You're right about me, Lena said. 9 years ago, I probably would have done exactly what Cyberdyne did. I was so focused on climbing the ladder, on success at any cost, that I wouldn't have cared about safety concerns or ethics. But I'm trying to be different now. I'm trying to learn. Learn from someone else. I've paid enough tuition. Noah turned away again. My flagship product is failing, Lena blurted out. The Genesis project, our AI-assisted operating system. It's supposed to launch in 12 days, but the architecture is fundamentally flawed. The components are fighting each other. My best engineers have been working on it for 24 hours straight, and they're nowhere close to a solution. Noah paused but didn't turn around. And you thought you'd come ask the janitor to fix it? Is that really where you're at? I watched you teach last night. I saw how you think, how you solve problems. You're brilliant, Noah. You understand systems integration at a level my entire development team can't touch. So yes, I'm desperate enough to ask the janitor for help, because the janitor used to be Nathan Brooks, and Nathan Brooks was one of the best in the industry. Was, Noah said, past tense. That person doesn't exist anymore. I don't believe that. You can't teach the way you teach without still being who you were. The knowledge doesn't disappear just because you're holding a mop instead of a keyboard. Finally, Noah turned back to face her. His expression was unreadable. Why should I help you? Why should I help any company after what they did to me? Because it's the right thing to do? Lena said, then immediately regretted how naive that sounded. The right thing, Noah repeated. I did the right thing once. Look where it got me. Then do it for the wrong reasons. I'll pay you. Name your price. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Lena asked, frustration breaking through. Tell me what it would take. Noah was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he said, tell me what your AI does. Why it matters. Lena hesitated. The Genesis project was proprietary, confidential, but she'd already violated Noah's privacy. Turnabout seemed fair. It's designed to make computing accessible to people who've never had access before. The AI learns how individual users think, adapts the interface to match their cognitive style, handles complex tasks through simple voice commands. We're marketing it to enterprises, but the real goal is to break down the barrier between people and technology. To make computers work for everyone, not just people with technical training. Noble goal, Noah said, his tone unreadable. A lot of money in it too, I imagine. Yes, but that's not why I'm fighting for it. I'm fighting for it because if we get this right, We change everything. A kid in a place like this, she gestured at the community center, could access the same tools as a kid in Silicon Valley. The playing field could actually level. And if you get it wrong, if you launch it broken and it fails, then we've wasted 3 years and hundreds of millions of dollars. Then I lose my job and the next CEO shelves the project forever because it's too risky. Then nothing changes. Lena met his eyes. You asked what I want. I want to build something that matters, something that helps people instead of just making shareholders richer. Maybe that sounds stupid coming from a CEO, but it's true. Noah looked at her for a long time. Then he said, I need to set up for class. Come inside. He led her through the building to the gymnasium. In daylight, it looked even more makeshift than it had the night before. The computers were ancient, some of them held together with duct tape. Extension cords snaked across the floor like electrical veins. But Noah moved through the space with practiced efficiency, powering up systems, checking connections, booting programs. These machines, Lena said, where did they come from? Dumpsters mostly, surplus sales, donations from people who were going to throw them away anyway. Noah opened a laptop that looked at least 10 years old but ran smoothly. Funny thing about technology, people replace it long before it stops working. With the right knowledge, you can make garbage sing. Is that what you've been doing? Rebuilding these? Someone has to. These kids can't afford new computers. Can't afford the software either, so I teach them open source alternatives. Linux instead of Windows, GIMP instead of Photoshop. It's not perfect, but it works. How many students do you have? 23 regulars. Another dozen who come when they can. Some of them are homeless, couch surfing, helping raise younger siblings. They're not here because they love coding. They're here because they're smart enough to know this might be their only way out. The words hit Lena hard. She'd gotten into tech because she'd loved it, because it had been interesting and challenging. But for these kids, it was survival, a life raft in an ocean that was trying to drown them. What do you teach them? She asked. Depends on the student. Basics for some, how to use a computer, how to navigate the internet safely, how to spot scams and predatory ads. For others, advanced stuff. Mia's building a website for a local business. Jamal's working on a portfolio app for his photography. David wants to get into cybersecurity. Noah's voice softened when he talked about them. They're good kids. They deserve better than what they've gotten. You care about them. Someone should. Noah finished with the last computer and turned to face her. All right, tell me about your AI integration problem. Technical details. Lena pulled out her phone and opened the files Sarah had sent her. For the next 20 minutes, she walked Noah through the Genesis architecture, the conflicts they were encountering, the solutions they'd attempted. He listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the heart of the issue. When she finished, Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your team is trying to solve the wrong problem. What do you mean? They're treating this like a communication issue, how to get the AI and OS to talk nicely. But that's not the problem. The problem is philosophical. You've got two systems that are both designed to be in control, and you're trying to make them share control. That's never going to work. So what's the solution? Noah walked to one of the whiteboards and picked up a marker. He started drawing diagrams, boxes and arrows, flowcharts that became increasingly complex. As he worked, Lena saw the transformation that had happened the night before. This wasn't a defeated whistleblower or a humble janitor. This was Nathan Brooks, system architect, doing what he was born to do. You need a hierarchical mediator, he said, adding another layer to his diagram, but not the way your team is thinking. They want a simple pass-through that routes requests. What you actually need is an intelligent governor, something that understands both the AI's learning protocols and the OS's resource management that can make real-time decisions about priority and execution. It needs to be smart enough to know when to let the AI optimize and when to enforce OS stability. That's what I suggested this morning. My chief architect said it would take months to build. It would if you're building from scratch, but you don't need to build from scratch. You adapt existing frameworks. Noah added more detail to his diagram. There's an open source project called Arbiter, does distributed resource management for server clusters. The core logic could be modified for your use case. You'd need someone who understands both the source code and your proprietary systems, but the foundation is already there. Lena stared at the whiteboard. In 10 minutes, Noah had identified a solution her team hadn't even considered. Could you do it? Modify the framework? Theoretically, yes. Practically, Noah set down the marker. I haven't written production code in 7 years. I'm rusty. And even if I wanted to help, I can't. I signed NDAs when I was fired from Cyberdyne. I'm legally prohibited from working in systems architecture for any competing company for 10 years. We're 9 years in. That's insane. Non-competes shouldn't be enforceable for that long. They're not, usually, but I had access to classified defense projects. Cyberdyne's lawyers made sure the restrictions were ironclad. Noah's expression was bitter. 1 more year and I'm free. But right now, I touch your code and they sue me into oblivion. Lena felt the hope that had been building collapse. So that's it? You know how to fix this, but you legally can't? I can't write the code, but I can teach someone else how to do it. Noah looked at her steadily. If your team is willing to learn from a janitor, I can walk them through it. Consult, not code. That's legally distinct. You do that? After everything? No, Noah said, but I do it for those kids out there who are going to benefit if your AI actually works the way you say it will. I do it because the only thing worse than being blacklisted for doing the right thing is knowing you could have helped and chose not to. The door opened and teenagers began filing in, laughing and talking, dropping backpacks on tables. They stopped when they saw Lena, their expressions shifting to guarded suspicion. Mr. Noah? Mia, the girl with box braids, looked between them. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Noah said. Everyone, this is Ms. Hart. She owns the company where I work. She needs help with a technical problem. The lady from last night? Jamal said, his tone accusatory. The one who followed you? Yes, and she's apologized. Right, Ms. Hart? All eyes turned to Lena. She felt like she was back in middle school, facing judgment from peers who could smell weakness. I'm sorry, she said. I made assumptions about Noah, about what he was doing, and I was completely wrong. I scared you, and that was unfair. This program is amazing, and I should have respected it from the beginning. The students looked at each other, then at Noah. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Mia shrugged. Okay, but you can't shut us down. This is the only place most of us can access real computers. I'm not shutting anything down, Lena promised. Actually, I want to help. What do you need? The question hung in the air. Noah looked surprised. The students looked skeptical. Better computers, David said finally. These ones work, but they're slow. Takes forever to render anything. More software licenses, another student added. We can't practice with industry tools because we can't afford them. Internet that doesn't die every 10 minutes, Jamal said. The router's ancient. Lena pulled out her phone and started taking notes. Give me a list. Everything you need. I'll have it delivered by the end of the week. Why? Mia's eyes were narrow with suspicion. What do you want in exchange? It was a fair question. In the corporate world, everything was transactional. Nobody gave without expecting something in return. But looking at these kids, brilliant, hungry, fighting against systems designed to keep them down, Lena realized what she wanted. I want to learn, she said simply. I want to understand what I've been missing, sitting in my tower office. And I want Noah to help save my company, and I think he's more likely to do that if I prove I'm not the person he thinks I am. That's a lot of wants, Noah said dryly. Yes, Lena agreed, but I'm offering something in return. Equipment, software, resources. And if you help me fix Genesis, I'll set up a proper funding structure for this program, make it sustainable instead of dependent on salvaged garbage. Garbage that sings, Noah corrected, but his tone was less hostile. All right, we'll help you with your AI problem, but the kids come first, always. If your project starts interfering with their education, the deal's off. Agreed, Lena said. She looked at the room full of teenagers watching her with cautious hope. Thank you, all of you. Class started and Lena found herself in the strange position of sitting in a community-centered gymnasium, watching a janitor teach coding to underprivileged kids while her company's flagship product crashed and burned 40 floors above the city. It should have felt like a waste of time. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd done in months. The next morning, Lena arrived at Tech Vanguard with Noah beside her in the elevator, and the sight of them together sent ripples of confusion through the lobby. Employees did double takes. A junior developer literally stopped mid-stride, coffee cup halfway to his lips, staring at the CEO and the night janitor riding up together in silence. Noah wore the same worn Carhartt jacket from the night before, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw tight with something that looked like dread mixed with determination. "You don't have to do this," Lena said quietly as the elevator climbed toward the 42nd floor. "I can explain the solution to my team. You don't have to face them directly." "Yes, I do." Noah's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. "If I'm going to help, I need to see the actual code. And your team needs to see me, needs to understand who's giving them guidance. Otherwise, they'll dismiss every suggestion because it's coming through you instead of from someone they respect. They might dismiss it anyway. Probably. I'm a janitor with a high school diploma as far as they know. Why would they listen?" The bitterness was back in his voice. "But that's their problem to solve, not mine. I promised those kids I'd help, so I'm helping." The elevator doors opened to reveal Sarah Kim waiting, her expression hovering between exhaustion and desperation. She'd clearly been at the office all night again, same clothes as yesterday, hair pulled into a messy bun, shadows under her eyes that looked like bruises. Her gaze moved from Lena to Noah and back again, confusion evident. "Lena, we're running out of time. The manufacturer needs final specifications by Friday, or we lose our production slot. That's 4 days, and we're not even close to—" She stopped, looking at Noah again. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "This is Noah Brooks," Lena said. "He's going to help us solve the Genesis problem." Sarah's confusion deepened. "I don't understand. Is he a new hire? From which firm?" "He's not from a firm. He works here. Night custodial staff." Lena watched Sarah's face carefully. "He's also one of the most brilliant systems architects in the industry, and he knows how to fix our integration issues." For a moment, Sarah just stared. Then she laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "You're joking. Please tell me you're joking. We're 4 days from catastrophic failure, and you brought a janitor to fix our billion-dollar AI system?" "I brought an expert," Lena said firmly. "What he does for a living doesn't change what he knows." "With all due respect, this is insane. We have senior engineers with decades of experience who can't solve this problem, and you think someone who cleans toilets—" Sarah stopped herself, but the damage was done. Noah's expression had gone carefully blank, the same protective shutdown Lena had seen in the hallway of the community center. "I'll wait outside," he said quietly, turning back toward the elevator. "No." Lena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Noah stays." "Sarah, I understand your skepticism. I felt the same way 24 hours ago, but I've seen what he can do. And more importantly, I've seen our senior engineers fail for 2 straight days, so we're going to try something different. If you can't accept that, you can leave." Sarah's jaw dropped. "You're serious?" "Completely. Noah, come with me." Lena led them into the development lab, where Thomas Park and 5 other engineers were hunched over their workstations like soldiers in a foxhole. The room smelled of stale coffee and stress. Monitors displayed cascading error logs, diagnostic tools running in endless loops, code that grew more convoluted with each attempted fix. Thomas looked up when they entered, his bloodshot eyes moving from Lena to Noah with the same confusion everyone else had shown. "Team, this is Noah Brooks," Lena announced. "He's going to consult on the Genesis integration problem. I need everyone to listen to what he has to say." The silence that followed was heavy with skepticism and something close to insult. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "No disrespect intended, but who exactly is Noah Brooks? I don't recognize the name from any of the major firms." "I'm the guy who cleans your office," Noah said bluntly. "And 7 years ago, I was a senior systems architect at Cyberdyne. Before that, I contributed to the foundational architecture of SecureCom protocols that most of your security frameworks still rely on. I know you have no reason to believe me, and honestly, I wouldn't believe me either if I were in your position. But your CEO asked me to look at your problem, so here I am." The skepticism in the room crystallized into something harder. Thomas exchanged glances with the other engineers, a silent conversation happening in raised eyebrows and subtle head shakes. Cyberdyne, one of the younger developers said slowly. Weren't they involved in that whistleblower scandal? The grid failure? Yes, Noah said. I was the whistleblower. I reported safety concerns, got fired for it, and spent the next 7 years unemployable in this industry. That's the short version. The long version doesn't matter right now. What matters is your AI integration is failing because you're treating it like a communication problem when it's actually a governance problem. Thomas leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. With respect, we've already explored governance models. Priority hierarchies, decision trees, buffer systems. None of them work. The overhead is too high or the conflicts still cascade. Because you're building your governance layer from scratch, Noah said, moving toward the nearest whiteboard. You don't need to. There's an open source framework called Arbiter designed for distributed resource management in server clusters. The core logic handles exactly the kind of conflict resolution you need. Prioritizing competing requests, managing resource allocation, preventing cascade failures. You adapt it for your use case instead of reinventing the wheel. He started drawing on the whiteboard, his movements confident and precise. Diagrams emerged, system architecture that grew increasingly complex, showing how the Arbiter framework could be modified to mediate between the Genesis AI and the underlying operating system. As he worked, he explained his thinking, pointing out weaknesses in Tech Vanguard's current approach and demonstrating how his proposed solution addressed each one. Lena watched the engineers' faces carefully. The skepticism didn't vanish, but something else appeared. Reluctant interest. Thomas stood and moved closer to the whiteboard, studying Noah's diagrams. One of the other engineers pulled up documentation for the Arbiter framework on her screen. This could work, Thomas said slowly, grudgingly. The logic structure is elegant, but adapting open source code to proprietary systems isn't simple. We'd need someone who understands both the framework internals and our specific implementation. I understand both, Noah said. I can't write the code myself, legal restrictions from my previous employment, but I can guide your team through the adaptation process, show you where to modify the framework, how to integrate it with your AI's learning protocols, how to build in fail-safes for edge cases. How long would this take? Sarah asked. She'd moved into the room during Noah's explanation, her skepticism tempered by cautious hope. With a good team, 48 hours to build a working prototype, another day to test and refine. You'd make your Friday deadline. Noah capped the marker and turned to face them. But only if you're willing to actually listen to what I'm telling you instead of dismissing it because of who I am. The challenge hung in the air. Lena could see the engineers wrestling with their pride, their assumptions, their discomfort at taking direction from someone they'd probably never noticed, despite walking past him dozens of times. In the corporate hierarchy they understood, janitors were invisible. Expertise was measured by degrees and salaries and LinkedIn profiles. Noah had none of those markers of legitimacy, but he had the solution. That was becoming increasingly clear. All right, Thomas said finally, we'll try it your way. But if it doesn't work, you're no worse off than you are now, Noah interrupted. You've got nothing to lose except your pride, and honestly, your pride isn't going to mean much when Genesis crashes in production. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fair enough. Where do we start? For the next 6 hours, the development lab transformed from a tomb of despair into something that resembled controlled chaos. Noah stood at the whiteboard, or moved between workstations, explaining concepts, answering questions, pointing out errors before they became problems. He had a gift for teaching that Lena had seen with the kids at the community center, an ability to meet people at their level of understanding and guide them forward without making them feel stupid. No, look here, he said to one engineer struggling with the framework adaptation. You're trying to force the Arbiter logic to mirror your existing priority system. Don't do that. Let Arbiter work the way it's designed to work, and adjust your AI protocols to communicate in terms Arbiter understands. You're trying to teach it English when you should be learning its language. The engineer stared at his screen, then suddenly his expression cleared. Oh, that's actually brilliant. If we restructure the AI requests as resource allocation queries instead of priority flags, exactly. Now you're thinking like the system instead of thinking at the system. Lena watched from the doorway, fielding calls and emails, but unable to tear herself away completely. There was something magnetic about watching Noah work, seeing him come alive in a way that cleaning offices could never allow. This was who he was supposed to be. This was the life that had been stolen from him by an industry that valued loyalty over integrity. Around noon, Marcus Chen appeared at Lena's elbow, his expression troubled. "We need to talk about the security footage." Lena had almost forgotten. The video of Noah accessing her laptop in the middle of the night, the evidence that had seemed so damning yesterday. With everything happening, it felt like a problem from another lifetime. "Not now, Marcus." "Lena, this can't wait. I've reviewed more footage. He's been accessing multiple executive computers, not just yours. Whatever he's doing, it's systematic. And now you've brought him into our most sensitive development project?" Marcus lowered his voice. "I don't care how brilliant he is. This is a security breach." "Give me until end of day," Lena said. "I'll talk to him and get an explanation." "And if the explanation is that he's stealing proprietary information, then we'll deal with it. But Marcus, look at him." She gestured toward the lab where Noah was explaining something to Thomas, using hand gestures to illustrate system architecture. "Does that look like a corporate spy to you?" "The best ones never do," Marcus said darkly. "End of day, Lena. Then this goes official." He left, and Lena felt the weight of another clock ticking down. She had until tonight to solve multiple impossible problems, save Genesis, clear Noah's name, and somehow make sense of why a man who'd lost everything because of his integrity would risk it all again by stealing corporate data. By 4 p.m., the engineering team had made more progress than they'd managed in the previous 2 days combined. The Arbiter framework was loading, integrating with Genesis's core systems in ways that looked promising. Error logs that had been screaming with conflicts were starting to quiet. It wasn't solved yet. There were still bugs to fix, edge cases to account for, stress tests to run. But for the first time since the crisis began, Lena could see a path to success. "Take a break," she told the team. "Order dinner, get some air, come back in an hour. We're going to be here late, so pace yourselves." The engineers scattered, grateful for respite. Noah remained at the whiteboard, staring at his diagrams with the focused intensity of someone checking their work for errors. Lena approached carefully. "You did good today," she said. "The team is listening now." "Some of them. Thomas still thinks I'm a fraud who got lucky. I can see it in the way he double-checks everything I say." Noah didn't sound offended, just tired. Can't blame him. In his position, I'd be skeptical too. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Noah turned to face her, immediately wary. "About what?" "Security footage shows you accessing my laptop. Multiple times over the past month, middle of the night, always when the building was empty. You knew my password, or you bypassed it somehow." Lena kept her voice neutral, non-accusatory. "I need to know what you were doing." Something flickered across Noah's face, not guilt exactly, but something close to it. He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with how much to say. Finally, he pulled out his phone and opened a folder of photographs. He handed the phone to Lena without comment. The images showed computer screens displaying code, specifically code from Tech Vanguard's security infrastructure. But interspersed with the code screenshots were other images, vulnerabilities, backdoors, security flaws that would make any IT professional's blood run cold. Noah had documented dozens of critical weaknesses in the company's systems, each one carefully annotated with notes about potential exploits and recommended fixes. "You were auditing our security," Lena breathed. "Why?" "Because I saw the same patterns I saw at Cyberdyne," Noah said quietly. "Your company is growing so fast that security is an afterthought. Everyone's focused on development, on features, on beating competitors to market. Nobody's thinking about what happens when bad actors find the holes you've left open. I started noticing them while I was cleaning. Passwords on sticky notes, unlocked computers, sensitive data left visible on screens, so I started looking deeper. By accessing executive computers without permission. I couldn't exactly file a formal security report. I'm a janitor. Nobody would have listened. And by the time I realized how bad it was, I knew I had to document everything before I said anything, because otherwise it would just be my word against the company's interests." Noah took his phone back, his expression grim. You've got 3 separate entry points where someone with moderate skill could access your entire customer database. Your AI development servers have authentication protocols that could be bypassed by a first-year computer science student. And your financial systems? He shook his head. If someone wanted to steal from you, they could, easily. Lena felt sick. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was going to. I've been building up documentation, making sure I had proof before I stuck my neck out again. You know what happened last time I reported security concerns? I lost everything. So forgive me for being cautious. His voice hardened. And then you followed me and accused me of espionage, which really didn't make me eager to trust you with this information. But you're telling me now. Because you're going to find out anyway. Your security director already suspects me of something. Better you hear the truth from me than make up your own story about what you think I was doing. Noah crossed his arms. So go ahead. Fire me, sue me, whatever you need to do. But fix the security holes first, because if you don't, someone else will find them, and they won't be documenting them for your benefit. Lena looked at the photos again, understanding slowly crystallizing. Noah had risked his job, his safety, potentially his freedom, to protect a company that had already shown him what happened to whistleblowers. He'd done it quietly, methodically, building an ironclad case before saying anything, because he'd learned from past mistakes that good intentions meant nothing without proof. You're not fired, she said. You're promoted. Noah blinked. What? I'm creating a new position, Chief Security Architect. You'll lead a full audit of our systems, implement fixes for every vulnerability you've found, and build a security culture in this company that actually means something. Lena's mind was already racing ahead, seeing possibilities. We'll work around your Cyberdyne restrictions, consulting role, not direct coding. You'll guide a team of engineers who do the implementation. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Noah, you just saved our flagship product, and now you're telling me you've been protecting our company for months without anyone asking you to. You're exactly the kind of person who should be in a leadership role. I'm a janitor with a blacklisted past and legal restrictions that make me unemployable in this industry, Noah said flatly. Your board will never approve this. Your investors will think you've lost your mind. And your employees will revolt at the idea of reporting to someone who used to clean their toilets. Then they can find new jobs, Lena said. I'm not asking for permission, Noah. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You can accept the position or decline it, but either way, you're not cleaning offices anymore. You've proven you're worth far more than that. I don't want your charity. This isn't charity. This is me recognizing talent and refusing to waste it. Lena met his eyes. You told me yesterday that people like me closed ranks instead of standing up for you. You were right, but I'm trying to be different. I'm trying to be the person who actually does the right thing instead of just talking about it. So let me do this. Let me prove that not everyone in this industry is the same. Noah studied her face, searching for something. Sincerity, maybe, or hidden motives. Whatever he saw must have been enough, because his rigid posture softened slightly. There's something you should know, he said quietly. The security vulnerabilities I found, some of them are being actively exploited. I found evidence of unauthorized access in your financial systems 3 weeks ago. Someone's been siphoning small amounts of money, nothing dramatic enough to trigger alerts, but consistent. I haven't been able to trace who, but it's happening. The revelation hit Lena like a physical blow, corporate theft on top of everything else. How much are we talking about? Maybe 50,000 over the past 6 months. Small transfers disguised as routine operational expenses. Whoever's doing this knows the system well enough to hide in the noise. It could be anyone. Employee, contractor, someone external who gained access. I have a suspect, Noah said, but I need to verify before I make accusations. Give me 3 days and full access to your financial systems, and I'll give you a name. Lena should have been angry at the theft, at the vulnerability, at how long this had apparently been going on without detection. Instead, she felt something almost like relief. Noah had been protecting them all along, even when he had every reason not to, even when they'd given him nothing but minimum wage and suspicion in return. You have full access, she said, whatever you need. But Noah, thank you for caring about this company more than it deserved. I don't care about the company, Noah said. I care about not letting criminals get away with it. There's a difference. Before Lena could respond, her phone erupted with calls. Sarah, Thomas, 3 board members, her head of operations, everyone calling at once with the same message. Genesis had just passed its first successful stress test. The Arbiter integration was working. They might actually make the deadline. The development lab exploded into celebration when Lena returned with the news. Engineers who'd been dead on their feet 30 minutes ago were suddenly energized, high-fiving, laughing with the giddy relief of people who'd been staring at failure and just glimpsed survival. Thomas actually hugged Sarah, then looked embarrassed and immediately busied himself with his keyboard. Noah stood apart from the celebration, watching with a small, satisfied smile. He'd done this, given them the solution, guided them through implementation, turned certain disaster into probable success. But he wasn't part of their world, wasn't included in their victory. He was still the janitor who'd gotten lucky with one good idea. Lena crossed the room and pulled Noah into the circle. "This happened because of you," she announced to the team. "All of you did brilliant work today, but we wouldn't have gotten here without Noah's expertise. So when we're celebrating Genesis's launch next week, remember who made it possible." The engineers applauded, some enthusiastically, others more reservedly, still uncomfortable with the social dynamics of celebrating someone they'd dismissed hours earlier. But it was a start. Recognition where recognition was due. "We still have 3 days of work ahead of us," Thomas said, ever the pragmatist. "The prototype works, but we need to refine it, test edge cases, make sure it scales. Noah, if you're willing to stay on as consultant through launch..." "I'm here," Noah said, "but I need to leave by 10 p.m. every night. I have other commitments." "The community center," Lena said. "Your students." Noah nodded. "They come first, always." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue. Launch week demanded all-hands dedication, long hours, sleeping at the office if necessary. But Lena caught his eye and shook her head. Noah's boundaries were non-negotiable. If he said the kids came first, then the kids came first. "We'll work around your schedule," Thomas agreed reluctantly, "as long as you're available during business hours." "I'll be here at 6 a.m., Noah said. "That gives us 16 hours a day. Should be enough." The team returned to work with renewed energy, refining the Arbiter integration, hunting for bugs, preparing for the battery of tests that would determine whether Genesis lived or died. Lena watched them for a few more minutes, then stepped out to make calls she'd been avoiding, the board members who would demand explanations, the investors who needed reassurance, the manufacturers who were waiting for final specifications. But first, she called Marcus Chen and told him to stop the security investigation. She explained about the audit Noah had been conducting, the vulnerabilities he'd found, the theft he'd uncovered. Marcus was skeptical until she sent him the documentation Noah had compiled. Then he was horrified. "This is bad, Lena. If this gets out, it won't. We fix it quietly, we find the thief, and we implement Noah's security recommendations. Nobody outside this conversation needs to know how exposed we were." "You're going to trust him after he hacked into executive computers?" "He didn't hack anything. He used passwords people left written down on sticky notes or walked past unlocked computers. Our security was so lax that a janitor could compromise it without any sophisticated tools. That's not his fault. It's ours." Lena paused. "And Marcus? I'm making him chief security architect. He reports directly to me, and he has my full authority to implement whatever changes he deems necessary." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Lena thought they'd been disconnected. Finally, Marcus said, "You're going to get destroyed for this. The board, the investors, the employees, nobody's going to accept a janitor in executive leadership. Then I'll deal with the consequences. But I'm not letting talent go to waste because of arbitrary hierarchies. Noah's proven himself 10 times over in the past 24 hours. He deserves this opportunity." "I hope you're right," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he doubted it. "Because if you're wrong, this doesn't just hurt you. It hurts the entire company." Lena ended the call and leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Marcus was right to be concerned. What she was proposing flew in the face of every corporate norm. You didn't promote people without degrees, without track records, without the proper credentials. You definitely didn't promote someone who'd been fired from their last industry position for being a whistleblower. But everything about the past 48 hours had challenged Lena's assumptions about how things were supposed to work. The traditional approach had led to Genesis nearly failing. The traditional hierarchy had missed critical security vulnerabilities. The traditional way of evaluating talent had left their most valuable asset pushing a mop in the middle of the night. Maybe it was time to try something untraditional. She returned to the lab to find Noah explaining something to a small cluster of engineers, using analogies that made complex concepts accessible. They were listening, really listening now, not just humoring him, but engaging with genuine interest. One asked a follow-up question. Another pulled up documentation to verify something Noah had said and found he was exactly right. This was what leadership looked like, Lena realized. Not sitting in corner offices making pronouncements, but getting in the trenches, teaching, guiding, meeting people where they were, and bringing them forward. Noah had more natural authority in his weathered Carhartt jacket than most executives had in their $1,000 suits. The hours blurred together. Chinese food appeared from somewhere. Coffee flowed in endless cups. The engineers worked with the focused intensity of people who could see the finish line and were determined to reach it. Noah moved between them like a conductor managing an orchestra, keeping everyone synchronized, catching problems before they cascaded, offering encouragement when frustration mounted. At 9:30, he stood and stretched. "I need to go. Students will be arriving in 30 minutes. "You're really leaving?" one of the younger engineers asked, surprised. "We're so close, and you'll get closer without me hovering. You know what you're doing now. Trust yourselves." Noah pulled on his jacket. "I'll be back at 6 a.m. If you run into problems overnight, document them clearly, and we'll address them in the morning." He left without ceremony, just a quiet exit that felt wrong, given what he'd contributed. Lena followed him to the elevator. "I meant what I said earlier," she told him, "about the position, Chief Security Architect. I'm making it official tomorrow." Noah pressed the button for the ground floor. "You'll regret this. Promoting me causes you political problems you don't need." "Probably, but I'll regret not doing it more." The elevator descended in silence for a moment. Then Lena said, "Can I ask you something? Why do you care about those kids so much? You work 3 jobs, you barely sleep. You could use that time to rest or rebuild your own life. Why give it to them?" Noah was quiet, watching the floor numbers count down. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with old pain. "My daughter was 13 when everything fell apart. Smart kid, brilliant, really. She loved computers, loved coding, wanted to be an engineer like her dad. And then I lost my job, lost our house, lost everything. We ended up in a neighborhood a lot like the one where I teach now. She went to an underfunded school where they didn't even have a computer lab, where teachers were overwhelmed and resources were non-existent. She stopped talking about being an engineer, started talking about just getting through high school, maybe getting a job at a restaurant or retail store." He paused, jaw working as if the words were physically difficult to produce. "I watched her dreams die because I couldn't provide the opportunities she needed. Because the system failed her the same way it failed me. And I couldn't do anything about it. I was working 80 hours a week just to keep us fed. By the time I stabilized enough to help her, she'd given up. Now she's 19, working at a grocery store, no plans for college, no interest in technology. I lost her to poverty and exhaustion." The elevator reached the ground floor, but neither of them moved. "I teach those kids because I can't get my daughter back," Noah said. "But maybe I can save someone else's kid. Maybe I can make sure they don't give up on their dreams just because they were born in the wrong zip code. It's not charity, Lena. It's penance." The doors opened and he walked out, leaving Lena standing alone in the elevator with tears burning behind her eyes. She'd thought she understood what drove Noah, but she'd been wrong. It wasn't altruism or nobility or any of the other sanitized motivations she'd assumed. It was grief and guilt transformed into action, the desperate need to fix in others what he couldn't fix in himself. She rode the elevator back up, but instead of returning to the development lab, she went to her office and sat in the dark, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere down there, Noah was teaching students who didn't know how lucky they were to have him. Somewhere down there, his daughter was working a minimum wage job, her potential unrealized because the system had failed her at a crucial moment. And up here, in her glass tower, Lena was part of that same system. She'd benefited from it, climbed through it, become successful by playing its rules. But what had it cost? Who had she left behind in her ascent? How many Noahs had she overlooked? How many brilliant minds had she dismissed because they didn't fit her narrow definition of talent? Her phone buzzed with another update from the development lab. Testing was going well. Genesis was stabilizing. They were going to make it. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of how close they'd come to failure, and how it had taken someone the industry had discarded to save them. Noah had been invisible to everyone at Tech Vanguard, just the quiet man who emptied their trash and vacuumed their floors. How many other invisible people were out there, full of knowledge and capability, dismissed because they didn't have the right credentials or the right connections? Lena pulled up her calendar and started drafting an email to her executive team. She would announce Noah's promotion tomorrow, and she would do it in a way that made clear this wasn't a publicity stunt or a token gesture. She would explain what he'd done for the company, what he'd risked, what he'd achieved despite every obstacle the industry had thrown at him. And she would make it clear that anyone who had a problem with it was welcome to find employment elsewhere. It would cause problems. Marcus was right about that. There would be board members who questioned her judgment, investors who worried about her stability, employees who resented reporting to someone they'd once considered beneath them. But Lena had spent her entire career trying to prove she deserved respect, trying to earn legitimacy in an industry that questioned whether women belonged in leadership roles. She knew what it felt like to be underestimated. Maybe it was time to use that understanding for something meaningful. She finished the email and scheduled it to send at 8 a.m., giving herself time to back out if she'd lost her nerve overnight. Then she returned to the development lab and worked alongside her team until 3 in the morning, when exhaustion finally forced her home. In her car, driving through empty streets, Lena thought about trajectories and choices. 2 days ago, she'd been certain of her path: climb higher, prove herself stronger, become undeniable. Now that path felt hollow. Success without purpose was just accumulation. Power without responsibility was just ego. Noah had lost everything and found meaning teaching kids in a rundown gym. What was Lena building with her corner office and her equity and her CEO title? What would be left when she was gone? The questions followed her into her apartment, into her bed, into restless dreams where she was both the person in the tower and the person looking up at it, wondering if there was anyone inside who cared about the world below. Lena woke at 5 a.m. to 17 missed calls and 43 emails, all arriving after she'd sent her announcement about Noah's promotion. The message had gone out at 8 as scheduled, and apparently the corporate world had lost its collective mind in response. Board member Richard Caldwell had called 6 times. Her investors were demanding an emergency meeting. 3 senior executives had submitted carefully worded emails that basically asked if she'd suffered a mental breakdown. She lay in bed scrolling through the messages, her stomach churning. This was worse than she'd anticipated. Richard's final voicemail was particularly venomous. "Lena, I don't know what game you're playing, but promoting a janitor to executive leadership makes this company look like a circus. Call me back immediately, or I'm convening an emergency board meeting to discuss your fitness as CEO." So much for having time to build support for the decision. The backlash was immediate and fierce, exactly as Marcus had predicted. Lena forced herself out of bed, showered in water that felt too cold, and dressed in her most severe suit, black, sharply tailored, armor for the battle ahead. She arrived at Tech Vanguard by 6:15 to find Noah already in the development lab, working with the engineering team as if nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. The email announcement meant that everyone now knew Noah wasn't just a consultant brought in to solve a crisis. He was being elevated to their level, given authority over systems and people, made permanent rather than temporary. And the engineers who'd been cautiously respectful yesterday were now exchanging uncomfortable glances and whispering in corners. Thomas intercepted Lena before she could enter the lab. His expression was carefully neutral, but tension radiated from every line of his body. "We need to talk. About Noah." "What about him?" Lena kept her voice level, professional. "The team is uncomfortable, not with his technical abilities. Everyone agrees he's brilliant. But making him chief security architect? Lena, that's a C-level position. He'd be attending executive meetings, making company-wide decisions, representing Tech Vanguard to clients and partners. And his background," Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The Cyberdyne situation raises questions about judgment, about loyalty. He showed extraordinary judgment at Cyberdyne. He puts safety over his career, which is exactly the kind of person I want in leadership. Or he's someone who can't be trusted to keep company secrets when he disagrees with company decisions, Thomas countered. I'm not saying he was wrong to blow the whistle. I'm saying that from a business perspective, it makes him a risk. What happens when we make a choice he doesn't like? Does he go to the press? To regulators? Lena had expected this argument and had her response prepared. What happens when we make a choice that's genuinely dangerous or unethical and nobody has the courage to speak up? We become Cyberdyne. We become the kind of company that prioritizes profit over safety and gets people hurt. I'd rather have someone willing to challenge bad decisions than someone who'll stay quiet while we drive off a cliff. That's idealistic, but this is reality. The board is going to crucify you for this decision. And honestly, Thomas lowered his voice, I think they might be right. Noah's talents are undeniable, but there are ways to utilize him without putting him in executive leadership. Keep him as a consultant, pay him well, give him respect and recognition. But asking the industry to accept a janitor as a C-level executive at a major tech company, it's too much, too fast. Before Lena could respond, her phone rang. Richard Caldwell, calling for the 8th time. She silenced it, but the interruption had made Thomas's point for him. The old guard wasn't going to accept this quietly. I'm not backing down, Lena said firmly. Noah earned this position. The fact that he cleaned offices for 7 years doesn't change what he's capable of or what he's already done for this company. Then you're going to lose your job over this, Thomas said bluntly. The board can remove you with a majority vote. Richard's been looking for an excuse since you were appointed. You just handed him one. The words hit harder than Lena wanted to admit, but she kept her expression neutral. If the board wants me gone because I promoted the person who saved our flagship product and identified millions in security vulnerabilities, then maybe I'm not supposed to be CEO of this company. Thomas studied her face, his own expression softening slightly. You really believe in him that much? I believe in doing the right thing even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Lena met his eyes. And I believe we've built an industry that's brilliant at innovation, but terrible at recognizing talent when it doesn't fit our narrow expectations. Noah is proof of that. How many other brilliant people have we overlooked because they didn't go to the right schools or work at the right companies? Probably a lot, Thomas admitted. But changing that doesn't happen by executive fiat. It happens gradually through culture shifts and policy changes and waiting for the perfect moment that never comes while talented people waste their potential in jobs that don't challenge them. Lena's voice rose despite her attempts to stay calm. I'm tired of gradual change, Thomas. I want actual change, the kind that makes people uncomfortable because it challenges assumptions they've never questioned. Thomas opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah Kim appeared, her expression urgent. Lena, Richard Caldwell is here, in the conference room with 3 other board members. They're demanding to speak with you immediately. So the emergency meeting was happening with or without official convening. Lena's pulse quickened, but she nodded calmly. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. She walked into the development lab where Noah was explaining something to 2 engineers, his hands moving expressively as he described system architecture. He looked up when Lena entered, and something in her expression must have warned him because his face tightened. Problems? He asked quietly. Board members, wanting to discuss your promotion. Lena kept her voice low. This might get ugly. Then withdraw the offer. Tell them you made a mistake, that it was a heat-of-the-moment decision during a crisis. I'll understand. Will you? Lena searched his face. Because I think you have spent 7 years understanding why people don't stand up for what's right. I don't want to give you another reason to believe that. Noah's expression was unreadable. You shouldn't sacrifice your career for me. You've worked too hard to get where you are. So have you. The difference is I haven't been knocked down yet. Maybe it's time I risk something that matters. Lena straightened her shoulders. Keep working. I'll handle this. She walked to the conference room with her heart hammering, but her stride confident. The board members were already seated. Richard Caldwell at the head of the table, because of course he was, flanked by Patricia Morrison and James Chen, both senior members with decades of industry experience. The 4th person was David Kumar, the company's lead investor, and the one voice that might actually listen to reason. Lena, Richard began without preamble, What the hell are you thinking? Good morning to you too, Richard. Coffee? She gestured toward the pot on the credenza, deliberately casual despite the tension crackling through the room. This isn't a social call. Your email this morning, promoting a janitor to chief security architect, it's insane. Patricia, tell her. Patricia Morrison leaned forward, her expression more diplomatic than Richard's, but no less concerned. Lena, we understand you're under stress. The Genesis crisis has been intense, and we appreciate that you found a solution. But this promotion seems like a decision made in the heat of the moment without proper consideration of the implications. I've considered the implications extensively, Lena said, taking a seat across from them. She projected calm she didn't entirely feel. Noah Brooks identified and documented critical security vulnerabilities that our entire IT department missed. He developed the solution that saved Genesis. His expertise is exactly what this company needs in a security leadership role. His expertise from 9 years ago, James Chen interjected, before he was fired for violating non-disclosure agreements and blacklisted from the industry. That's not exactly a sterling recommendation. He was fired for reporting safety concerns that turned out to be completely valid. Cyberdyne's software failed catastrophically 6 months later, exactly as he predicted. He was right, and they punished him for it. That may be true, but it doesn't change the perception problem, Patricia said. Our clients, our partners, our investors, they're going to see a janitor promoted to executive leadership and question our judgment. This makes us look desperate or incompetent or both. We were desperate, Lena said bluntly. Genesis was failing and none of our senior architects could fix it. A man we'd dismissed as irrelevant because of his job title solved the problem in hours. If that doesn't demonstrate the limitations of how we evaluate talent, I don't know what does. It demonstrates that he's smart, Richard snapped. Nobody's questioning that. But being smart doesn't qualify someone for executive leadership. There are political dimensions, client relations, strategic planning. Does he have any experience with those aspects of the role? Do any of us when we start? Leadership skills are learned, Richard. We all had our first executive position at some point. After working our way up through proper channels, building relationships, proving ourselves over years of progression, Richard's face was reddening. Not jumping from janitor to C-suite in one insane leap. David Kumar finally spoke, his voice quieter than the others, but carrying weight. Lena, help me understand something. Is this really about Noah's qualifications, or is this about making a statement? Because if it's the latter, if you're trying to prove a point about class or opportunity or whatever, then you're using your position as CEO to push a social agenda rather than making sound business decisions. The question was fair, and Lena took a moment to consider her answer carefully. It's both, she said finally. Yes, Noah is qualified. His technical expertise is unquestionable, his work ethic is exceptional, and his ethical standards are higher than most people I've met in this industry. But yes, I'm also making a statement. The talent exists in places we haven't been looking, and we're hurting ourselves by maintaining arbitrary barriers based on job titles and past employment. Arbitrary barriers like education and professional experience? Patricia's tone was sharp. Those aren't arbitrary, Lena. They're how we ensure competence and professionalism. Noah has both. He has a master's degree in computer science from MIT and 15 years of professional experience before Cyberdyne. He's more educated than half our executive team. The revelation landed like a bomb. The board members exchanged glances, their certainty wavering. That wasn't in his employment file, James said slowly, because he applied for a custodial position. Why would he include his graduate degree on an application to be a janitor? He was blacklisted from the industry, needed any job he could get, and knew mentioning his real background would raise questions he couldn't afford to answer. Lena leaned forward. The point is, we had a brilliant MIT-educated systems architect cleaning our toilets for 7 years and none of us noticed. That should terrify all of you, because it means we're terrible at recognizing talent. How many other people like Noah are we missing? Richard recovered first, though he looked shaken. Even so, the optics are disastrous. The press will have a field day with this. Tech CEO promotes janitor to executive role. It sounds like a publicity stunt. Then we control the narrative, David Kumar said, speaking up again. We don't hide Noah's background. We celebrate it. We tell the story of how someone with exceptional qualifications ended up in custodial work because of industry blacklisting, and how we recognized his value when others didn't. It becomes a story about second chances and meritocracy rather than desperation. Lena felt a spark of hope. If David was thinking strategically rather than just objecting, she might have an ally. That could work, Patricia admitted reluctantly, if we frame it correctly. But Lena, you need to understand the risk you're taking. If Noah fails in this role, if he makes mistakes or can't handle the pressures of executive leadership, it reflects on you. The board will see it as evidence of poor judgment. I'm willing to take that risk. And if we're not? Richard's voice was cold. Lena, you're a talented executive with a bright future, but you're also inexperienced as a CEO. This company needs stable, predictable leadership, especially as we approach the Genesis launch. If you're going to make controversial decisions that put your position at risk, we need to seriously consider whether you're ready for this role. There it was, the threat she'd been expecting. Fall in line or face removal. Lena had a choice to make, and it needed to happen now. She could back down, withdraw Noah's promotion, maintain her position as CEO and continue building her career, or she could hold firm and potentially lose everything she'd worked for. She thought about Noah in that gymnasium, teaching kids who reminded him of his daughter. She thought about how he'd risked everything at Cyberdyne to report safety concerns, and how the industry had crushed him for it. She thought about the person she wanted to be versus the person she'd been becoming, someone who calculated risk and reward, who prioritized her own advancement over doing what was right. Then I guess you have a decision to make, Lena said quietly, because I'm not withdrawing the promotion. Noah earned it, and I'm not punishing him for industry bias and class prejudice disguised as professional standards. If the board wants to remove me for that decision, call the vote. But I'm not backing down. The silence that followed was suffocating. Richard looked like he wanted to explode. Patricia seemed torn between respect and frustration. James was inscrutable. David Kumar studied Lena with an expression that might have been approval or might have been calculation. We need to discuss this privately, Richard said finally. Lena, step out. We'll call you back in 15 minutes. Lena left the conference room on shaking legs, but kept her expression neutral until the door closed behind her. Then she leaned against the wall and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She'd just put her career on the line for someone she'd met 3 days ago. It was either the bravest or the stupidest thing she'd ever done, and she wouldn't know which until that door opened again. Sarah found her in the hallway. How bad is it? They're deciding whether to fire me. Jesus, Lena. Sarah looked stricken. Is this really worth it? Worth losing everything you've built? I don't know, Lena admitted. Ask me in 15 minutes. She returned to the development lab where Noah was still working, though she could tell from the tension in his shoulders that he knew something was wrong. The other engineers were studiously avoiding looking at either of them, the awkwardness palpable. They're deliberating, Lena said quietly, approaching Noah's workstation, about whether to fire me for promoting you. Noah closed his eyes briefly. I told you this would happen. You did. You were right. Congratulations on being right. Lena surprised herself by laughing, slightly hysterical. I might be unemployed in 10 minutes. That's got to be some kind of record for a CEO. It's not too late. Go back in there. Tell them you reconsidered. Stop, Lena interrupted. Stop trying to give me an exit. I made my choice, Noah. I'm living with it. She sat down next to him, suddenly exhausted. Can I ask you something? Was it worth it? Losing everything at Cyberdyne to do the right thing? Noah was quiet for a long moment. I lost my career, my marriage, my financial security. My daughter grew up in poverty because I wouldn't stay quiet. So no, in a lot of ways it wasn't worth it. The cost was too high. But you'd do it again. Yeah, I would. He met her eyes. Because living with myself after staying silent would have been worse than any of the consequences I faced. Some prices are too high, even when you're the one paying them. That's what I thought, Lena said. She felt strangely calm now, the anxiety replaced by a kind of clarity. If they fire me, I'll land somewhere. People always do. But if I back down now, if I let fear make my decisions, I'd have to live with knowing I chose my career over integrity, and I don't think I could. You're a better person than most people in this industry, Noah said softly. Better than I expected when you followed me that first night. Low bar to clear. Fair point. He almost smiled. For what it's worth, thank you. For believing I deserved better than I got. Most people didn't. Before Lena could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway. They're ready for you. Lena stood, smoothing her suit jacket more from habit than necessity. Wish me luck. You don't need luck, Noah said. You need them to be better people than they probably are. It wasn't reassuring, but it was honest. Lena walked back to the conference room, knocked once, and entered without waiting for permission. The board members looked tired, their expressions varying from resigned to hostile. Richard still looked angry, but David Kumar's face was neutral in a way that suggested compromise had been reached. We've made a decision, Richard said stiffly. Against my better judgment, we're going to allow Noah Brooks's promotion to proceed, on a provisional basis. Lena's knees almost buckled with relief, but she kept her expression controlled. What does provisional mean? It means he has 90 days to prove himself in the role, Patricia explained. We'll evaluate his performance, his integration with executive leadership, his ability to handle the responsibilities of the position. If he succeeds, the promotion becomes permanent. If he struggles, we reassess without prejudice. That's fair, Lena said, though she knew 90 days was barely enough time to settle into any new position, much less one as complex as chief security architect. But there are conditions, David Kumar added. Noah reports directly to you, not to the board. That makes you personally responsible for his performance and behavior. Any mistakes he makes reflect on your judgment as CEO. Additionally, we want regular updates on the security audit he's conducting, and we expect him to present his findings and recommendations to the full board. He can do that. And one more thing, Richard said, his voice hard. If this becomes a PR disaster, if the press coverage damages the company's reputation or client confidence, we revisit this decision immediately. No 90-day grace period. Am I clear? Perfectly clear. Lena met his eyes steadily. Anything else? Yes. Don't make us regret this, Patricia said. We're taking a significant risk by supporting you on this. Don't prove us wrong. Lena left the conference room feeling like she'd just survived a car crash, shaky but intact. She made it halfway back to the development lab before the adrenaline wore off, and her legs went weak. She ducked into an empty office and sat down hard in a chair, pressing her palms against her face. She'd won. Barely, provisionally, with so many conditions it hardly felt like victory, but she'd won. Noah's promotion would proceed. She was still CEO, for now. But the cost of that victory was becoming clear. Richard would be watching for any excuse to remove her. The other board members would be second-guessing every decision she made. And Noah would be under scrutiny that would make most people crack under the pressure. She'd gambled both their careers on the belief that talent and integrity mattered more than credentials and convention. Now they had 90 days to prove she'd been right. Lena returned to find Noah exactly where she'd left him, though he looked up the moment she entered. The question in his eyes was clear. You're officially Chief Security Architect, she said. Provisional appointment, 90-day evaluation period, approximately 17 conditions attached. But you're in. Something flickered across Noah's face. Relief, anxiety, disbelief. What did you have to promise them? That I'd personally guarantee your performance and take responsibility for any mistakes you make. So no pressure, but my career is now tied directly to whether you succeed in this role. That's insane. You barely know me. I know enough. Lena pulled up a chair beside him. I know you're brilliant, ethical, and dedicated. I know you care more about doing things right than doing things easily. And I know you've survived 7 years of poverty and prejudice without losing those qualities. That's more than enough. Noah shook his head slowly. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. I haven't decided which. Why not both? Lena smiled despite her exhaustion. Now, we have 90 days to conduct a comprehensive security audit, implement fixes for every vulnerability you've found, identify whoever's been stealing from us, and prove to a skeptical board that I didn't just commit career suicide. Where do we start? With coffee, Noah said. Very strong coffee. Because if we're doing this, we're doing it right, and that means a lot of very long days. Over the next week, Tech Vanguard transformed in ways both visible and invisible. The visible changes were the easiest to track, Noah moving from night custodial shifts to daytime executive hours, though he still left every evening at 10 to teach his students. New security protocols being implemented across all systems. Hardware upgrades, software patches, authentication requirements that made people grumble but kept data safer. The invisible changes were harder to measure, but more profound. Engineers who'd dismissed Noah as a lucky janitor began seeking his advice on their own projects. Security became a company-wide priority rather than an afterthought. And Lena found herself learning to lead differently, watching how Noah taught and guided rather than commanded, how he built trust through competence and respect rather than authority. The Genesis launch happened on a Friday morning, 3 weeks after Noah's promotion and ahead of their original deadline. The system performed flawlessly. No crashes, no conflicts, no cascade failures. The AI and operating system worked in harmony, mediated by the elegant solution Noah had designed and the engineering team had implemented. Industry analysts praised it as revolutionary. Early reviews from test users were overwhelmingly positive. But the story the press latched onto wasn't the technology, it was Noah. Someone had leaked his background, not the MIT degree or his work at Cyberdyne, but the fairy tale version. Janitor saves billion-dollar product launch. From cleaning offices to corner office. Tech CEO promotes custodian to executive role. The coverage was everywhere, some of it admiring, much of it skeptical. All of it generating attention that made Tech Vanguard's PR department work overtime. Richard Caldwell called Lena 3 times in one day, increasingly agitated. This is exactly what we were afraid of. We look like a sideshow. We look like a company that recognizes talent regardless of where it comes from, Lena countered. Our stock price is up 14% since the Genesis launch. Client inquiries have tripled. I'd say the market doesn't think we're a sideshow. But privately, she worried. The attention on Noah was intense, and not all of it kind. Industry forums debated whether the promotion was legitimate or a publicity stunt. Competitors whispered that Tech Vanguard must be desperate if they were promoting janitors. And some of the coverage took on ugly undertones, questioning Noah's credentials, digging into his past, trying to find scandals or controversies. Noah handled it with quiet dignity that Lena admired and couldn't quite understand. When reporters called for interviews, he declined politely. When industry blogs published skeptical takes on his qualifications, he ignored them. He just kept working, conducting his security audit, mentoring engineers who were willing to learn from him, teaching his evening classes as if nothing had changed. "Doesn't it bother you?" Lena asked him one evening as they reviewed security reports in her office. "The things people are saying?" "People have been saying worse for 7 years," Noah replied without looking up from his laptop. "At least now they're saying it about someone in a position to prove them wrong instead of someone they successfully destroyed. Still, the constant scrutiny, the questions about whether you deserve this—" "I don't deserve it," Noah interrupted. "Not more than 1,000 other talented people who'll never get this opportunity. I got lucky. You happened to follow me on a night when I was teaching instead of doing literally anything else. You happened to be desperate enough to take a chance on me. Luck isn't the same as deserving. That's not true. You earned this by being brilliant and refusing to compromise your integrity. Lena, can I be honest with you about something?" Noah closed his laptop and looked at her directly. "I appreciate what you've done, more than I can express. But don't turn me into a symbol. Don't make this about redemption or second chances or proving the system wrong. I'm just a guy doing a job. That's all I want to be." "But you're not just a guy doing a job. Whether you want it or not, you've become a symbol. People are watching to see if this works, if someone from your background can succeed in this world." "I know, and the weight of that is crushing." Noah's voice was quiet but strained. "Every decision I make, every mistake, every moment of uncertainty, it's not just about me anymore. It's about whether someone like me deserves to be here. The pressure of representing everyone who's ever been overlooked or dismissed or told they don't belong. Lena, I can barely breathe under that weight." The raw honesty of the admission caught Lena off guard. She'd been so focused on the political battle of getting Noah promoted, on defending the decision to the board and the press that she hadn't fully considered the psychological burden she'd placed on him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't think about how that would feel." "I know you didn't, and I'm not blaming you, but I need you to understand. I can't be your proof of concept. I can't be the example that validates your belief in meritocracy or second chances. I'm going to make mistakes, and when I do, people are going to use them as evidence that people like me don't belong here. And I need to know that when that happens, you're not going to regret this." "I won't regret it," Lena said firmly. "Mistakes are part of learning any new role. The standard you're held to shouldn't be perfection. It should be the same standard we hold everyone else to. Except we both know I'm not being held to the same standard. I'm being held to a higher one because I didn't come up the traditional way. One major mistake and people will say it proves I wasn't qualified." He was right, and Lena hated that he was right. The unfairness of it burned in her chest, that Noah had to be twice as good to be considered half as legitimate, that his mistakes would be magnified while others' errors were dismissed as learning experiences. "Then we make sure your first 90 days are flawless," Lena said. "We document every success. We build an airtight case for your value to the company. And when the evaluation period ends, the board won't have a choice but to make your position permanent." Noah smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're an optimist. I'd forgotten what that looked like." Over the following weeks, they built that case together. Noah's security audit uncovered not just the vulnerabilities he'd already documented, but dozens more, some of them critical enough to make Lena's blood run cold. He presented his findings to the board with quiet authority, walking them through each weakness and his proposed solution. His implementation timeline was aggressive but achievable. His budget requests were reasonable and well justified. Even Richard Caldwell had to admit the audit was thorough and professionally executed. Even Patricia Morrison acknowledged that Noah's security recommendations were exactly what the company needed. The skepticism was still there, but it was being replaced, slowly, grudgingly, with respect. And then, 6 weeks into Noah's 90-day evaluation period, everything fell apart. The crisis began with a single email that arrived at 2:15 on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus Chen forwarded it to Lena with the subject line, "We have a serious problem." The email was from a journalist at TechCrunch requesting comment on allegations that Noah Brooks had accessed confidential client data without authorization and had shared proprietary Tech Vanguard information with outside parties. The journalist claimed to have documentation proving Noah had violated multiple security protocols and company policies. They were running the story in 24 hours with or without Tech Vanguard's response. Lena's hands went cold as she read the message twice, then a third time, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. They didn't. She called Marcus immediately. "Tell me this isn't real," she said when he answered. "I wish I could." The journalist sent screenshots, access logs showing Noah's credentials being used to pull client files, email records that appear to show him sending proprietary code to an external address. "Lena, if this is legitimate, it's a fireable offense at minimum. At worst, it's corporate espionage, and we're looking at criminal charges." "Noah wouldn't do this. There has to be another explanation." "I hope you're right, because if you're not, the board is going to crucify both of you. Richard's already calling for an emergency meeting." Marcus paused. "Where's Noah now?" "In his office, I think, working on the security audit." "Get him. We need to look at this together before the board gets involved." Lena found Noah exactly where Marcus had guessed, surrounded by monitors displaying security logs and system diagrams. He looked up when she entered, and whatever he saw in her face made him stand immediately. "What happened?" "We need to go to Marcus's office. Now." Lena's voice was tight. "There are allegations that you accessed client data without authorization and shared proprietary information externally. A journalist has documentation, and they're running the story tomorrow." Noah's face went pale. "That's not possible. I haven't accessed any client files except as part of the security audit, and I certainly haven't sent anything to external addresses." "Then someone's setting you up, and we need to figure out who and why before this destroys both of us." They went to Marcus's office, where he had the journalist's screenshots displayed across multiple monitors. The evidence looked damning. Access logs with Noah's username and credentials, timestamps showing late-night data pulls, email metadata indicating files sent to an encrypted external server. Everything pointed to Noah systematically stealing client information and company secrets. "This is fabricated," Noah said immediately, studying the logs. "Look at the timestamps. Half of these show me accessing systems at times when I was teaching at the community center. I have 20 witnesses who can verify I was nowhere near a company computer." "Can you prove that definitively?" Marcus asked. "Security footage, phone location data, something concrete?" "The community center doesn't have security cameras, but my students—" Noah stopped, realization dawning across his face. "Wait, look at the access patterns. These queries are too sophisticated, too targeted. Whoever did this knew exactly which files to pull, which systems to access. They have deep knowledge of our infrastructure." "Or they had help from someone with that knowledge," Marcus said carefully. "Noah, I need to ask, is there any way your credentials could have been compromised, passwords written down, computer left unlocked, anything that would give someone access?" "No. I use two-factor authentication on everything, unique passwords for each system, and I never leave my workstation unlocked." Noah moved closer to the monitors, his eyes scanning the logs with increasing urgency. "But these access patterns, I've seen this before." "Where?" Lena asked. "In the financial data I was investigating, the small-scale theft I told you about." Noah pulled up his own files on one of Marcus's monitors, comparing the patterns side by side. "Look, same methodology, same systematic approach to covering tracks. Whoever's been stealing from the company is the same person who's framing me now." "That's a hell of a claim," Marcus said. "Can you prove it?" "Give me 2 hours with full system access and I can trace this back to its source." Noah's voice was steady but urgent. "Marcus, I know how this looks. I know you have every reason to suspect me, but I swear on everything I have left, I didn't do this. And if you let me prove it, I can catch whoever actually did." Marcus looked at Lena. "Your call. But if we give him access and he destroys evidence or compromises the investigation further—" "We're already compromised," Lena interrupted. "If this story runs tomorrow, Noah's reputation is destroyed regardless of the truth. The board will force me to fire him, probably fire me too, and whoever's actually responsible gets away with it." She met Noah's eyes. "Do it. Find whoever's behind this." For the next 2 hours, Lena and Marcus watched Noah work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He pulled logs, traced IP addresses, analyzed access patterns with the kind of methodical precision that came from years of experience hunting system vulnerabilities. He barely spoke except to request additional access or mutter observations to himself. "There," he said finally, pointing at a screen. "That's the origin point. Someone created a mirror of my credentials 3 weeks ago. Not a copy of my actual password, but a duplicate authentication token that registers as me in the system logs. Every action taken with that token shows up as me, but I never actually performed those actions." "Who has the capability to create duplicate tokens?" Marcus asked. "Anyone with administrative access to our authentication servers, which is—" Noah pulled up a list. 12 people. System administrators, senior engineers, executive leadership. "That's still too many suspects," Lena said. "Can you narrow it down?" "Already did. Look at the timing of when the token was created. 3 a.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks ago. I cross-referenced that timestamp with building access logs." Noah pulled up security footage. Only one person with admin privileges was in the building at that time. The footage showed a figure at a workstation on the 43rd floor, the executive level. The image quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to identify. James Chen, board member and former CTO. The revelation hit like a physical blow. James Chen had been with Tech Vanguard since its founding, was one of the most respected figures in the company, had decades of impeccable reputation. The idea that he would steal from the company he'd helped build seemed impossible. "You're certain?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. "The evidence is clear. He created the duplicate token, used it to access financial systems and client data, and when my security audit got too close to exposing him, he planted evidence to frame me. It's actually brilliant in a twisted way. Who would believe the janitor over a founding board member?" Noah's voice was bitter. "He probably thought I'd be easy to discredit, just another whistleblower who got what was coming to him." "We need to bring this to the board immediately," Lena said, "before that story runs." "And say what?" Marcus looked anguished. That a board member has been stealing from the company and framing our controversial new security chief? Richard already thinks you've lost your mind. This will sound like a desperate conspiracy theory. Then we make the evidence so overwhelming they can't dismiss it. Noah was already compiling documentation. Every transaction, every access log, every piece of digital forensics that proves what happened. We present it methodically, professionally, and we let the facts speak for themselves. They worked through the night, building an airtight case. By 6 a.m., they had a presentation that tracked James Chen's activities over the past 8 months. Small financial transfers totaling over $200,000, accessed client data likely sold to competitors, and finally the systematic effort to frame Noah when the security audit threatened to expose everything. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 a.m. Lena arrived exhausted but determined, Noah beside her carrying the weight of evidence that would either save or destroy them both. Richard Caldwell looked smug, clearly expecting this to be Noah's final humiliation. Patricia Morrison seemed sad, as if disappointed that her faith had been misplaced. David Kumar was unreadable. James Chen was conspicuously absent. "Where's James?" Patricia asked as they took their seats. "He called this morning," Richard said. "Said he was feeling unwell and couldn't attend. He'll join remotely if needed." "He won't be joining at all," Lena said, "because this meeting is about him." She watched the confusion ripple across their faces as she began the presentation. She walked them through Noah's security audit, the discovery of financial irregularities, the systematic theft that had been occurring for months. Then she showed them the evidence of the frame job, the duplicate credentials, the fabricated access logs, the carefully constructed false narrative designed to destroy Noah's credibility before he could expose the truth. "You're accusing James Chen of corporate theft?" Richard's voice was incredulous. "This is insane, Lena. James is a founder. He's been with this company for 15 years, which gave him intimate knowledge of every system, every security protocol, every weakness he could exploit," Noah said quietly. "He pulled up the building access logs. This is him creating my duplicate credentials. This is him using those credentials to access client data. This is him sending proprietary code to an encrypted server registered to a shell company he controls." He walked them through each piece of evidence with clinical precision, anticipating objections, providing documentation for every claim. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock to something like horror as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. "We need to call James right now," David Kumar said, his voice hard. "Get his explanation before we proceed." Patricia made the call, putting it on speaker. James answered on the third ring, his voice carefully neutral. "Patricia, I heard there was an emergency meeting. What's this about?" "James, we have evidence suggesting you've been involved in corporate theft and have attempted to frame Noah Brooks for your crimes. We need you to come in and address these allegations immediately." The silence that followed was long enough that Lena thought he might have hung up. Then James laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Of course. The janitor is smarter than I gave him credit for. I should have known better than to underestimate someone who worked at Cyberdyne." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Richard looked like he might be sick. Patricia had gone pale. "Why?" David Kumar asked simply. "You helped build this company. You had equity, salary, respect. Why throw it all away?" "Because equity doesn't pay for medical bills when your wife has cancer," James said, his voice hollow. "Because salary doesn't cover experimental treatments that insurance won't approve. Because respect doesn't keep someone you love alive when they're dying, and the only thing that might save them costs more money than you can imagine." The revelation shifted the atmosphere in the room. James wasn't just a thief. He was desperate. "Your wife is sick?" Patricia's voice was soft with sympathy. "James, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped." "I tried. 2 years ago, I requested a loan against my equity. The board denied it because it would set a precedent. I asked about emergency hardship funds. You said it wasn't company policy to provide them, so I found another way." The bitterness in James's voice was palpable. "And before you judge me, ask yourselves what you would do if someone you loved was dying and you had the ability to save them but not the permission. Lena felt the moral complexity of the situation crash over her. James had stolen from the company, had tried to destroy Noah to cover his tracks. Those actions were wrong, potentially criminal, but the motivation, saving his wife's life, was understandable in a way that made simple condemnation feel inadequate. "What you did was still theft," Noah said, his voice gentle but firm. "And framing me for your crimes endangered innocent people, my students, Lena's career, the company's security. Your pain doesn't justify that." "I know," James said quietly. "I know what I did was wrong. I've known it every day for 8 months, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant more time with my wife. You can't understand that until you've watched someone you love dying by inches, and the only thing standing between them and survival is money." "How is she?" Patricia asked. "Your wife?" "In remission. The treatment worked. She has a chance now." James's voice broke slightly. "So I got what I wanted. I saved her life. And I'll pay whatever price that requires." Richard found his voice finally. "You'll resign from the board immediately. You'll return every dollar you stole, and we'll decide whether to involve law enforcement or handle this through civil litigation." "I expected nothing less," James said. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. To all of you, but especially to Noah. You didn't deserve to be caught up in this. I convinced myself that framing someone who'd already been destroyed once wouldn't matter as much as framing someone with something to lose. I was wrong." The call ended and the board sat in heavy silence. Finally, David Kumar spoke. "Well, Noah, you just proved beyond any doubt that you deserved the position Lena gave you. You saved the company from a security breach and caught a thief none of us suspected. I think your evaluation period can be considered successfully completed." "Agreed," Patricia said. "And I owe you an apology. I questioned whether someone with your background belonged in executive leadership. You've proven that background has nothing to do with capability." Even Richard grudgingly nodded. "You've earned your place here. I still think Lena's methods were reckless, but I can't argue with results." Noah didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. James was right about one thing. I have been destroyed before. I know what it's like to lose everything for making hard choices. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, even someone who tried to destroy me. "What are you saying?" Lena asked, though she suspected she already knew. "I'm saying that prosecuting James criminally destroys his family along with him. His wife just survived cancer. Does she need to lose her husband to prison on top of that? He stole money, not lives. He can pay it back, resign quietly, and that's punishment enough." "The law doesn't work that way," Richard said. "We have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders." "The law allows for prosecutorial discretion and private settlements," Noah countered. "We can handle this civilly if we choose to. And I'm choosing to show mercy to someone who showed me none, because I've learned that cycles of destruction don't end until someone chooses to break them." The board members exchanged glances. Finally, Patricia said, "I'll draft a settlement agreement. Full restitution, resignation from the board, legal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but no criminal charges if he complies fully." "That's more than he deserves," Richard said. "Maybe," Noah agreed, "but it's what I'm willing to live with." The journalist's story never ran. Lena's PR team provided them with the full context, not just the allegations against Noah, but the actual theft, the frame job, and most importantly, Noah's investigation that had uncovered it all. The story that eventually published was completely different. Security chief catches board member in corporate theft ring. Noah went from suspected criminal to celebrated investigator in the span of a single news cycle. The irony wasn't lost on Lena. Public perception shifted so quickly, so completely, based on which narrative reached them first. Noah could have been destroyed by false allegations, but instead he emerged as a hero. The randomness of it, how close they'd come to the other outcome, was terrifying. "You should enjoy this," Lena told Noah a week later as they reviewed security implementations in her office. "You were vindicated. The board apologized. Richard Caldwell actually used the words, 'I was wrong about you.' That's practically a miracle." I don't feel vindicated," Noah said. He was looking out the window at the city below, his expression distant. "I feel exhausted and sad for James, for what desperation drove him to, and guilty that my existence in this role caused so much chaos." "You didn't cause anything. James made his own choices." I know, but I can't shake the feeling that the industry that destroyed me and the industry that's now celebrating me are the same industry. It hasn't actually changed. It just found a narrative it likes better. Lena understood what he meant. The tech world loved a redemption story, an underdog triumph. But the systems that had blacklisted Noah still existed. The prejudices that made his promotion controversial still existed. One good outcome didn't fix structural problems. So what do we do? She asked. How do we actually create change instead of just good press? Noah turned from the window, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something like hope in his expression. We build the thing I should have asked for instead of the position you offered. We create a real pathway for people who've been shut out, not just feel-good initiatives or diversity statements, but actual programs with resources and commitment. You're talking about expanding the community center program. I'm talking about making it systemic. Tech Vanguard funds technology education centers in underserved neighborhoods across the city. We provide equipment, curriculum, instructors who actually know what they're doing. We create internship pipelines that bring kids from those centers into real positions here. We prove that talent exists everywhere, and we build the infrastructure to develop it. Lena felt excitement building despite her exhaustion. The board will say it's too expensive, too ambitious. Then I'll quit being chief security architect and run it independently. The work matters more than the title. Wait, Lena said, alarmed. You're serious? Noah met her eyes steadily. I took this position because you made it contingent on helping those kids. But if I can't actually help them, if this just becomes another executive job where I make speeches about opportunity while nothing actually changes, then what's the point? I'd rather go back to cleaning offices and teaching at night than become the symbol of change without the substance. The ultimatum was gentle but absolute. Noah wasn't interested in personal success divorced from purpose. He'd learned that lesson at Cyberdyne, had spent 7 years living it. He wouldn't repeat the mistake. Then we do both, Lena said decisively. You stay as chief security architect and lead the community technology initiative. We make it a company priority, fund it properly, measure success not by press coverage, but by how many kids we actually help. And when the board objects, we make them understand this isn't optional. It's who we are as a company. That's a beautiful speech, Noah said. But speeches don't change systems. Money and commitment do. Then we'll provide both. Noah, you've proven that my instinct to promote you was right. Now let me prove that my instinct to invest in your vision is right too. Over the next month, they built the proposal together, not just a feel-good initiative, but a comprehensive program with clear goals, measurable outcomes, and serious funding. They identified 10 neighborhood community centers that could host technology education programs. They recruited instructors, several of Noah's former students who'd aged out of his program and were now in college or early careers, eager to give back. They established partnerships with local schools to identify promising students. They created an internship track that would bring participants directly into Tech Vanguard positions. The proposal asked for $2 million in year one funding, with commitments for 3 additional years. It was ambitious, expensive, and exactly the kind of program that corporate boards typically rejected as too risky or too peripheral to core business. Lena presented it to the board on a cold morning in late November, Noah beside her. She'd learned to read the room by now, Richard's skeptical expression, Patricia's guarded interest, David Kumar's careful attention. They all knew this was important to her, which meant they were looking for reasons to say no without appearing heartless. $2 million is a significant commitment, Richard said when she finished, for a program that doesn't directly benefit the company's bottom line or competitive position. It benefits us by developing talent we can hire, Lena countered. It benefits us by building goodwill in communities we've historically ignored. And it benefits us by proving we actually believe the rhetoric we spout about diversity and opportunity. We already have diversity initiatives, Patricia pointed out. Recruitment programs at universities, mentorship for underrepresented groups. That start too late, Noah interrupted. By the time kids reach university, the gap is already too wide for most of them to bridge. They're years behind in technical knowledge. They lack the confidence that comes from early exposure, and they don't see people like them in the industry, so they don't imagine themselves belonging. We need to intervene earlier, consistently, with real resources. And you think 10 community centers will make a difference? Richard's tone was dismissive. In a city this size, that's a drop in the ocean. Every program that's ever changed anything started as a drop in the ocean, Noah said. 10 centers reach 200 kids. Those 200 kids grow up and become engineers, entrepreneurs, teachers. They create their own drops in the ocean. Change doesn't happen through grand gestures. It happens through sustained commitment to small actions that compound over time. David Kumar leaned forward. What's your personal stake in this, Noah? Beyond the obvious altruism. Noah was quiet for a moment, and Lena saw him wrestling with how much to reveal. Finally, he said, My daughter gave up on technology because I couldn't provide her with opportunities to develop her interest. She's brilliant, but she never got the chance to discover that. I can't get her back. The moment passed, the door closed. But I can make sure other parents don't have to watch their children's potential die from neglect. That's my stake. I'm trying to save kids like she used to be. The honesty landed heavily. Patricia looked moved. Even Richard's expression softened slightly. David Kumar studied Noah with something like respect. All right, David said finally. I'll support the proposal. 1-year funding to start with expansion contingent on documented success. But Noah, you're accountable for this. Regular reports, clear metrics, honest assessment of what's working and what's not. No inflating numbers or painting pretty pictures to justify continuation. I wouldn't insult you with anything less than honesty, Noah said. This matters too much to lie about. The vote passed 4-1 with Richard being the sole dissent. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The Community Technology Initiative would proceed, and Tech Vanguard would become something more than just another tech company chasing profits. As they left the boardroom, Noah grabbed Lena's arm. Thank you for fighting for this, for believing it mattered. Thank you for showing me what actually matters, Lena replied. I thought success meant corner offices and stock options. You've taught me it means something entirely different. The initiative launched in January, starting with the original community center where Noah had been teaching. The difference resources made was immediate and striking. New computers replaced the salvaged machines, proper software licenses enabled students to learn industry-standard tools, reliable internet meant nobody lost work to connection failures. The program expanded to 2 additional centers by February, then all 10 by March. Lena made a point of visiting each location, not for photo opportunities, but to actually understand what was happening. She met Mia, who was now assisting Noah with teaching and talking about studying computer science in college. She met Jamal, whose photography portfolio had earned him a scholarship. She met David, who'd been accepted into a cybersecurity training program. And she met dozens more students whose names she learned, whose dreams she heard, whose potential was finally being recognized. Noah was right. This was what mattered. Not the Genesis launch, or the stock price, or the industry accolades. This was actual change, measurable in kids who now had opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. But the most unexpected change was in Tech Vanguard itself. The engineers who'd been skeptical of Noah now sought out students from the community centers for internships. The company culture shifted from one of pure competition to something that included mentorship and giving back. Employees volunteered to teach at the centers, finding purpose beyond their day jobs. The initiative became a point of pride, something that attracted talent who wanted to work for a company that actually cared about community impact. 6 months after the program launched, Lena stood at a graduation ceremony for the first cohort of students who'd completed the advanced track. 30 teenagers received certificates, laptops donated by Tech Vanguard, and letters of recommendation for college applications or job interviews. Noah gave a speech that was characteristically humble and honest. You did this yourselves, he told them. The resources helped, but the work was yours. The late night studying, the frustration when code wouldn't compile, the determination to keep trying when things seemed impossible. That was all you. Don't let anyone diminish what you've achieved or tell you that you only succeeded because of charity. You succeeded because you're talented and hardworking, and you refuse to let circumstances define your limits. Watching the students' faces as they listened to Noah, Lena saw something she hadn't quite understood before. Noah wasn't just teaching them technical skills. He was teaching them to believe in themselves despite a world that told them people from their neighborhoods didn't become engineers. He was breaking cycles of poverty and limited opportunity, not through grand gestures, but through consistent presence and genuine care. After the ceremony, a young woman approached Lena nervously. She was 19 or 20, thin and tired-looking, wearing a grocery store uniform under a worn jacket. "Miss Hart? I'm Sophie Brooks, Noah's daughter." Lena tried to hide her surprise. Noah had mentioned his daughter, but had never suggested she might attend the ceremony. "It's wonderful to meet you, Sophie. Your father talks about you." "Not much, I'm guessing. We're not really close anymore. Haven't been since I was 13 and everything fell apart." Sophie's voice was matter of fact, but pain flickered beneath the surface. "I heard about the program, about what he's doing for these kids. I wanted to see it for myself." "He's proud of you," Lena said gently. "He may not say it, but I can tell." Sophie shook her head. "He's disappointed. I gave up on the things he taught me to care about. I stopped trying when things got hard, and now I'm working minimum wage with no plan and no future. While these kids," she gestured at the celebrating students, "they're getting everything I should have had." The bitterness was understandable but misplaced. "Sophie, your circumstances were different. You were dealing with trauma and instability that these students aren't facing. What happened to you wasn't a failure of character. It was a failure of support systems." "Maybe, but I still gave up. And now I look at these kids and I see who I could have been if I'd been stronger." Noah appeared beside them, and the tension that immediately filled the space between father and daughter was palpable. They looked alike. Same dark eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw, but they stood at a distance that spoke of years of accumulated hurt. "Sophie," Noah said quietly, "I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see what was more important than your actual family," Sophie said, and though her tone was light, the wound beneath was deep. "You've always been the most important thing in my life," Noah replied. "Everything I do is because I failed you once, and I'm trying to make sure other parents don't make the same mistakes." "You didn't fail me. The world failed us both. You were just trying to survive." Sophie's voice cracked. "But you disappeared into survival, Dad. You worked yourself to exhaustion, and even when you were home, you weren't really there. And now you're doing the same thing for these kids, giving them the attention and time and care you couldn't give me, and I'm supposed to what? Be happy about it?" The pain in Noah's expression was raw. "You're right. I wasn't there the way you needed. I was so focused on keeping us afloat financially that I lost sight of everything else that mattered. I can't undo that, Sophie, but I can try to prevent other kids from feeling what you felt." "By replacing me with students who remind you of me? That's not redemption, Dad. That's substitution." "Sophie," Noah's voice broke. "I don't know how to fix what's broken between us. I've tried. I've called, I've reached out, but you keep pushing me away and I understand why. I failed you when you needed me most, but I'm not trying to replace you. I'm trying to honor you by making sure your experience, what you lost, what you gave up, means something. That's the only way I know how to live with what happened." They stood in silence, years of unspoken hurt and missed connections heavy between them. Lena knew she should leave, give them privacy, but something made her stay. "What if I wanted to come back?" Sophie asked finally, so quietly Lena almost missed it. "Not to programming or computers or any of that, but to you. To having a father again instead of this polite stranger who sends birthday cards and tries too hard." Noah's face transformed, hope breaking through the careful control. "I would want nothing more. Sophie, you're my daughter. You will always be more important than any job or program or redemption project. I'm sorry I made you feel otherwise. I need you to actually be present, not just physically there while your mind is somewhere else planning the next lesson or solving the next problem." "I can do that. I will do that." Noah stepped closer, hesitant, as if approaching something fragile. "What would help? What do you need from me?" "Dinner. Once a week. Just us. No phone, no work talk, no students. Just us being family again." Sophie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "And maybe, this is going to sound stupid, but maybe you could teach me again, like you used to when I was little before everything fell apart. I miss that version of us." "That doesn't sound stupid at all," Noah said, and now he was crying too. "Sophie, I would love that. More than anything." Lena watched them embrace, Noah holding his daughter like she might disappear if he let go, Sophie crying into his shoulder the way she probably hadn't since she was a child. It was redemption of a different kind than Noah had been seeking. Not saving other people's children to atone for failing his own, but actually repairing the relationship he'd thought was broken beyond fixing. She slipped away quietly, giving them privacy for the reconciliation that should have happened years ago. Outside, the evening air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of rain. Lena stood in the parking lot of a community center in a neighborhood she'd never visited before this initiative, and felt something shift fundamentally inside her. She'd started this journey following a janitor she suspected of theft, driven by fear and protecting her position. She'd ended it here, watching a father reconnect with his daughter, surrounded by students whose lives had been changed by something she'd helped create. The distance between those two moments felt infinite. Her phone buzzed with messages, board communications, investor updates, 100 small crises demanding attention. The work never stopped. But for once, Lena didn't feel the urgent need to respond immediately. Some things were more important than stock prices and quarterly reports. Noah emerged from the building an hour later, Sophie beside him, both of them looking lighter than when they'd gone in. They were talking, actually talking, with the ease of people remembering how to be family. When Noah saw Lena, he smiled, genuine and unreserved in a way she'd never seen from him before. "Thank you," he said simply. "For all of it. The job, the program, the chance to become someone my daughter could be proud of again." "I didn't do anything," Lena replied. "You did the work. You saved Genesis, caught James, built this program from nothing. I just had the good sense to get out of your way. You stood up for me when no one else would. You risked your career to give me a second chance. That's not nothing, Lena. That's everything." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching students and their families celebrate in the community center windows. Then Sophie spoke up. "Ms. Hart, can I ask you something? Why did you do it? Risk everything for my dad?" Lena considered the question carefully. "Because he deserved better than what he got, and because I was tired of being part of a system that destroys good people for doing the right thing. I wanted to be better than that. Your father gave me the chance to prove I could be." "He has that effect on people," Sophie said, glancing at her father with something between affection and exasperation. "Makes you want to be better than you are." Noah looked embarrassed but pleased. "I'm just trying to make up for lost time." "Then stop trying to save the world and come have dinner with your daughter," Sophie said. "You promised. Once a week, remember?" "I remember." Noah turned to Lena. "Is it okay if I leave? I know we have security reviews scheduled for tomorrow." "Go," Lena interrupted. "Be with your daughter. The work will be there tomorrow." She watched them walk to Noah's old Honda, still bearing the same dent in the bumper from when she'd first followed him months ago. Everything had changed since that night, but that car remained constant, a reminder of where they'd started and how far they'd come. Lena drove back to her apartment through streets that felt different now. She'd always seen Seattle from above, from her office windows or her penthouse view, but Noah had shown her what the city looked like from the ground. The neighborhoods that didn't make it into tourism brochures, the people who were invisible unless you chose to see them, the potential that existed in places no one thought to look. 3 months later, Lena stood on stage at TechCrunch Disrupt, one of the industry's biggest conferences, giving a keynote about Tech Vanguard's Community Technology Initiative. The audience was full of executives and investors, people who measured success in market cap and disruption and innovation. She knew most of them would hear her words and file them away as nice ideas, but impractical for real business. But some would listen. Some would understand that true innovation wasn't just about technology. It was about recognizing talent wherever it existed and providing pathways for it to flourish. Some would take the model back to their own companies and adapt it, expanding the impact beyond what Tech Vanguard could achieve alone. "We found our chief security architect cleaning our offices at midnight," Lena told the audience. "Not because he wasn't qualified for better, but because the industry had decided he was too honest to be useful. We almost missed him entirely. How many other brilliant people are we missing because we're looking in the wrong places or asking the wrong questions?" She showed photos from the community centers, students coding, teachers mentoring, the graduation ceremony where 30 kids received certificates and opportunities. She shared statistics. 23 students had been hired as interns at tech companies, 5 had received college scholarships, 12 were still in the program working toward advanced certifications. The numbers were small in absolute terms, but enormous in impact. This isn't charity, Lena emphasized. It's enlightened self-interest. We're developing the talent pool we'll hire from in 5 or 10 years. We're building relationships with communities that have been shut out of the tech economy. And we're proving that the industry's diversity problems aren't about pipeline. They're about access and opportunity. The talent exists. We just have to stop pretending it doesn't. The response was mixed, some enthusiastic applause, some polite but skeptical acknowledgement. Change was hard, and asking successful people to question the systems that had rewarded them was always an uphill battle. But Lena had learned patience from Noah. Change didn't happen through single speeches or grand gestures. It happened through sustained commitment to small actions that compounded over time. Backstage after the keynote, she found Noah waiting with Mia and 3 other students from the program. They'd come to the conference as participants, not observers, attending workshops, networking with engineers, seeing themselves as part of the industry rather than outsiders looking in. "You did good," Noah said. "That speech will plant seeds, even if they take years to grow." "Speaking from experience?" Lena asked. "I reported safety concerns at Cyberdyne 9 years ago. The industry punished me, but the conversation about ethical responsibility in tech started getting louder. Sometimes the impact of doing the right thing takes time to become visible." He smiled. "I'm just glad I lived long enough to see some of those seeds sprout." "So what's next for you? You've fixed our security, launched the community program, reconciled with your daughter. What mountain do you climb now?" Noah laughed. "I was thinking about actually sleeping a full 8 hours. Maybe taking a vacation. Radical concepts, I know. You've earned it, though I have to say I've gotten used to you being around. Tech Vanguard won't be the same without you hovering over everyone's shoulder, making sure they're doing things right." "I'm not going anywhere," Noah said, surprised. "I signed a contract. Besides, I like it here. Turns out executive leadership suits me better than custodial work. Who knew?" "I knew," Lena said. "From the moment I saw you teaching those kids. You were always meant for this, Noah. The industry just took 9 years to figure it out." They stood together watching the students explore the conference, their excitement palpable as they discovered a world that was finally opening its doors to them. This was the future they were building, not perfect, not without setbacks, but genuinely different from what had come before. Lena thought about the person she'd been 6 months ago, so certain of her path and her success, measuring herself by titles and achievements. That person felt like a stranger now. She'd learned that success without purpose was empty, that power without responsibility was meaningless, and that real leadership meant lifting others up rather than climbing over them. "Thank you," she said to Noah, "for teaching me what actually matters." "You taught yourself," Noah replied. "You just needed someone to show you where to look." The conference continued around them, thousands of people discussing disruption and innovation and the future of technology. But standing backstage with Noah and his students, Lena knew the real future wasn't being discussed in those panels and workshops. It was being built here, one student at a time, one opportunity at a time, one person choosing to see potential instead of limitations. The road ahead would be long. Changing an industry didn't happen overnight, but they'd proven it was possible, that people could be better than the systems that shaped them, that second chances could transform lives, and that sometimes the most valuable talent was hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look. Lena Hart had followed a janitor one cold November night, expecting to find a thief. Instead, she'd found a teacher who'd taught her how to lead, a whistleblower who'd shown her what integrity looked like, and a father who'd reminded her that success meant nothing if it came at the cost of your humanity. She'd started this journey protecting her company. She'd ended it transforming it into something worth protecting. And in the process, she'd become someone worth being, not just a CEO, but a leader who actually made a difference. The conference ended and they returned to Seattle, to Tech Vanguard's gleaming headquarters, and the community centers scattered across the city, to the daily work of building something that mattered. There would be more challenges, more skeptics, more moments of doubt, but Lena faced them with Noah beside her and the knowledge that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were changing lives, one student at a time, They were building pathways where none had existed. They were proving that the industry could be better if enough people chose to make it so. And that, Lena had learned, was what real success looked like.